Good morning, and welcome to your Hillsborough MPO board meeting. Will everyone please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance and invocation?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Our gracious and heavenly Father, we're so thankful that you touched us with your loving hands this morning to awaken us to see another one of your beautiful days. We ask that you be with us throughout this day as we make decisions to make this county a better place for all of us to live, work, and play. We ask you to put your loving arms around those that put their lives on the line for us each and every day, whether they're first responders or military, on this soil or foreign soils. Father, we ask that you be with Commissioner Pat Kemp and the passing of her brother, that you put your loving arms of comfort around her and her family. Let them know that you're the one that can heal the broken heart and bring comfort to that family. We ask you to be with them in this time of bereavement. When our work is done here today, we ask you to take us back to our homes and find everything safe and sound. These are all blessed. We ask in your righteous and holy name. Amen.
Amen.
Good morning again to everyone. You have the minutes from our August 6, 2019 minutes. Is there any changes to those minutes? If not, may I have a motion to approve those minutes?
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Overman, second by Councilman Scalco to approve the August 6, 2019 minutes. Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor, let me know by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, likewise. Motion is adopted. We're in the public comment. I have two speaker cards. The first person is Sharon Calvert. Ms. Calvert, is she here? Okay. Each speaker has 3 minutes. And the timer is on the dais. Good morning.
Good morning. I'm Sharon Calvert, and I live in Tierra Verde in Pinellas County. It's becoming a little bit difficult or the lines are getting blurred on whether this is a transportation planning entity or a political committee. And I bring that up because on April 1st, in the deposition of the chair for All for Transportation, Tyler Hudson, he was asked numerous times how and why they calculated the spending percentages that they did in their transit tax referendum. The answer that was repeatedly provided was that information was political speech protected by the First Amendment, and so the voters weren't entitled to that information. But last year in August, Ms. Alden presented publicly All for Transportation's political speech representing the MPO, insinuating that the MPO supported the tax. And I brought this up a year ago. In addition, in June, as the 2045 Phase 2 survey was kicking off, the MPO invited Mr. Hudson, chair of the political committee, to participate in the radio kickoff event with WFLA. When that was brought to the attention of the MPO, why, he was somehow disinvited. But that was at the time when the tax has been embroiled in multiple lawsuits. Now on to the survey. I think the surveys that you've done are flawed. They're basically push polls. And what is a push poll? A push poll is a marketing technique commonly employed during political campaigns in which an individual or organization attempts to manipulate or alter prospective voters' views under the guise of conducting an opinion poll. The choices were very limited. They were oversimplified. They provided no information around costs, ridership, congestion relief, capital costs, operating cost. And in fact, the one item in this survey, this last survey, that had the most information was the I-4, I-275 interchange. So I believe that these surveys are flawed. I would like to see surveys that have a real-world view to them so that people have enough information to actually make a choice. Because just because somebody likes something, being asked if they like it, doesn't mean they'll ever use it or they'll ever want to pay for it. Thank you.
Jim Davison.
Good morning, Board. I know you have a full schedule. I won't take much of your time. I just wanted to comment on the letter that is in your packet today for comment. I think on the FDOT's Tampa Bay next, that you were concerned about the burden and the environmental justice concerns that were expressed in the letter. And I would urge you to also apply that to transit. It is well known that there are certain burdens as well as benefits of transit and highways. Many MPOs are moving to incorporate the burdens on the environmental justice populations with their transit, particularly fixed guideways. Multiple MPOs, Bay Area, Los Angeles, Seattle, Minneapolis, Sacramento, they're all incorporating affordable housing and how to maintain the neighborhoods that they wish to benefit, which are at risk of being destroyed by the very benefit they are trying to endow on those neighborhoods. And I would urge you to possibly include a member of the Affordable Housing Task Force on your board from here on in. I know you're not a land use. Oh, you got one? Excellent.
Chair.
Oh, well, a chair. But maybe a person of the community, just like many of the other, and not an elected official. That may go a little bit further. And then lastly, there was the new long-range transportation plan that was in your packet. There are certain things, they keep changing the format from long-range transportation plan to long-range transportation plan, which makes it very difficult for the people to even examine it. I'll give you a perfect example. In the old 2040 plan, bridge repairs and construction was $100 million. In this one, it's almost $1 billion. So there's discrepancies like that between one and the other. How could it go up $900 million bucks? Also, some of the terms such as like the travel time reliability, I think it said it was reduced by 34%. 34% from what? If I were to give you a pill and say this was going to make you 10 years younger 40 years from now, you wouldn't be 10 years younger. You'd still be 40 years old. And that's basically what you're using, the methods to do this. So it's to be accurate and so that the people have a real idea and are informed. I would urge you to try to put a basis about 34% of what. Thank you very much and have a good day.
Topher Morrison.
Good morning. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to speak. My name is Topher Morrison. I'm a resident of Tampa, Hillsborough County. I'd like to speak specifically regarding the concept of expanding lanes, and I'll do it through an analogy. A young couple gets married. They're having troubles. They're really frustrated. They're arguing all the time. They don't know if it's going to work, so they think, you know what would solve this problem? A baby. Let's get a baby. So they have a baby. That only actually complicates the problem and makes it more frustration. So about a year later, after they're wondering if it's going to work out again, they go, you know what would solve this problem? Another baby. The first baby doesn't have any companionship, so let's get two babies. So they have another baby. Doesn't solve the problem, though, does it? They still bicker, they still fight, and they still argue. Folks, we're contemplating building road babies right now. You cannot build yourself out of congestion. Additional lanes never solves the problem. And if it does, in the very rare cases where somebody can cite it, it's because they have robust transit systems and affordable housing and other systems in place that actually help take cars off the road. Your own data, if you look at it from heart, says that if you look at the difference in transportation from a workday versus a bank holiday, and we all know that it's much easier to get in town on a bank holiday than it is a normal workday. Anybody here know what the difference in percentage is of traffic flow on a bank holiday versus a normal day? Because the data is at heart. Here it is, 2%. 2% less cars on the road eliminates congestion. When you build more roads, you only create more opportunities for more congestion. When you provide the citizens ways of getting off the road, you only need 2%. Let's focus our energies on mass transit systems. Let's focus our energies on systems that get cars off of roads. There will always be the die-hard car enthusiasts, and I have no problem with them. They will continue to drive their cars no matter how congested it is. But there is a percentage of the population that if you gave them a better alternative, they would say, you know what, I don't like driving my car to work every day, or I don't like driving alone. I'd rather carpool. There are better solutions than just expanding different roads. And the notion of building a separate lane for bus rapid transit on a freeway is just nothing more than a Trojan horse to get another lane so another study can show that people aren't riding it so that we can then use it for a different purpose later. I'm begging you, let's not build any more road babies. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Is anyone else wishing to speak this morning? Anyone else? Seeing none, we'll close public comment. Now moving to committee reports and online comments. First, Mr. Bill Roberts, Chair of the Citizens Advisory Committee.
Morning, Mr. Chairman, board members. I'm Bill Roberts. I'm the chair of your Citizens Advisory Committee. I want to be brief because I know you have a full schedule, but I'd like to make a couple of comments from the report that would have been given a month ago when you were unable to hold your meeting. The Citizens Advisory Committee, in its August meeting, did have a discussion about the letter of comment, which I believe is in your packet for consideration today, regarding the supplemental environmental impact statement. There were some concerns expressed at that meeting that I'd like to relay to you that I think are relevant. The first of these is the committee expressed concern about the relocation of displaced residents and the available of affordable housing. Concern was expressed about global warming and air quality. Members expressed concern about the FDOT not being in full compliance with the original MPO motions passed in 2016 and 2017. There was some concern about the validity of the information and the calculation on how property taxes will be impacted by the proposed new investment. There was concern about the right-of-way costs. There was some concern raised about the assumptions behind the air quality model. What is assumed by cleaner running vehicles, alternative fuels, electric and autonomous vehicles. And of course, there was concern expressed about the concept of induced demand, which I know we've brought to this board previously. Regarding our most recent meeting, your Citizens Advisory Committee met on September 11th. The committee recognized and expressed its appreciation for outgoing member Vance Arnett, who served with us for a number of years. The committee welcomed Mr. Lou Prida as a new member of the CAC representing the business community. Thank you for approving that appointment. Also in attendance was Mr. Hoyt Prindle, who is expected to be appointed by this board as an appointee of Commissioner Pat Kemp. Prior to the public comment, the committee heard from Commissioner Kemp, who also thanked Mr. Arnett for his years of service. She then explained her strong support for the ferry project between South Shore and MacDill Air Force Base. There was no further public comment. Under action items, the CAC approved the following and has forwarded this to the MP board for action. The CAC approved amendments to the Transportation Improvement Program to reconcile planning funds with amounts listed in the MPO's Unified Planning Work Program. Crosswalk improvements on East Bush Boulevard, resurfacing on Hillsborough Avenue, and adding performance measure documents to Appendix C. I think those will come to you today or at a subsequent meeting. The CAC also heard from a number of presentations. Sarah Hendricks from Cutter presented the Transportation Demand Management Strategies for consideration in the MPO's plans. The MPO staff gave a preview of the draft 2045 Long-Range Transportation Plan. The FDOT provided a report on alternatives being considered in the PD&E study of the US 41 CSX grade study at Causeway Boulevard. And the committee discussed follow-up report on the MPO's draft letter of comments to the supplemental environmental impact statement. The CAC discussed with great interest the impact resulting from induced travel demand on highways in general and requested this be included as a future agenda topic. CAC members were reminded at that meeting of a workshop to be held September 24th, which was held. The purposes of that workshop were to discuss the 2045 plan, long-range plan. The workshop was well attended. MPO staff gave a thorough summary of the 2045 plan, followed by a healthy discussion lasting about 30 minutes. Because this was a workshop for learning more about that 2045 plan, there was no action taken. The CAC will hear more and plan to take action on the plan at our next meeting coming up in October. Be happy to answer any questions. Thank you for your attention to the report.
Any questions, Mr. Roberts? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Ms. Torres, online comments?
Good morning, Gina Torres, MPO staff. Regarding your roll call vote on the TIP amendments, the CAC and the TAC recommended approval. There was extensive input from committees regarding the action item to transmit a letter of comment on the TB Next SCIS, and I'll defer reading those because you're going to be hearing a presentation that covers those comments that the other committees besides the CAC made. The draft 2045 cost feasible plan was presented as a status report to the committees in September, and it's on their October committees coming up for action. But with your board action today to open the public comment period, you'll be hearing those comments and other public comments at the November 5th public hearing to adopt the plan. Committees heard lots of other status reports on interesting topics. I won't go through those. 2 points to note from the Tampa Bay Transportation Management, or the TMA Leadership Group meeting. Members had an opportunity to discuss needs and priorities for the upcoming legislative session with Senator Roussan. He's the current chair of the legislative delegation, and there was some great discussion. There is a resolution drafted supporting the I-275 State Road 60 interchange. The TMA also talked about options for clarifying roles and responsibilities of the MPO Chairs Coordinating Committee and T-BARDA in their regional transportation planning. We did not have any Facebook comments for today's meeting. There was just a handful of emails. Mauricio Rosas shared a Brookings Institute article. It highlights racism and exploitation of the poor in designing roadways that disproportionately affected or had fatalities among those marginalized groups. Rick Fernandez requested a summary of key differences between the 2040 and 2045 plans. He was sharing that at the Tampa Heights Civic Association meeting. Caitlin Johnson with the Tampa Bay Times requested some crash data around schools so she could report on those. Willie Hassel requested information on starting a medical transport business. Sky White was emailed us asking for information on transit ridership numbers. The MPO responded to all of those requests that those emails requested. And lastly, FHWA emailed to thank staff for sharing our work related to emergency preparedness and evacuation planning. So those are all your online comments. Thank
Any
you.
questions? Seeing none, thank you very much. Now I move the consent agenda. We have 2 items on the consent agenda: Committee on Appointments and Bylaws amendments for the TIS Committee. Any questions on those? Seeing none, have a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
Motion by Councilman Maniscalco, second by Commissioner Overman to approve the consent agenda. Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor, let it be known by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, likewise, motion is adopted. We must take a roll call vote on the Transportation Improvement Program amendments. Is there a motion to approve the Transportation Improvement Program amendments? Is there a motion? Is there a motion?
May we ask staff to come and give the presentation
Yeah.
about the transportation
Yes,
improvement program
please.
amendments? Okay. Sarah, could you come up and go over the TIP amendments for us? These are pretty routine amendments. We are rolling forward from some funds from the last fiscal year into the current fiscal year, and then there are a couple of tweaks. There's a crosswalk on Bush Boulevard that is proposed to just shift the location due to feasibility considerations. There's a resurfacing project on Hillsborough Avenue.
Yeah, Beth pretty much summarized them as they are. Sarah McKinley, MPO staff. We do have a couple of amendments that we're processing. We still have the roll forward amendments from the October meeting to process, as well as 3 amendments that we received. The fourth one, the update to our appendix, we went ahead and updated as a modification just to go ahead and add that language to the Transportation Improvement Program. So these are the amendments listed here. Number 6 is that rectification of the funding. This could also be considered a modification to the plan. This is just to make sure that what is shown in our UPWP as our planning funds match what's also in the Transportation Improvement Program for our planning funds. Oops.
And that's consistent with the UPWP that this board approved earlier.
Correct, yes. This actually was a new request from FHWA, Federal Highway Administration, this year. They haven't requested in the past. So this is a new request that we're addressing this year. Number 7 there is the East Bush Boulevard corridor study. Let me see, I think there's a map here. This is just showing where the 3 proposed crosswalks are. There was one that was proposed at 19th Street. This one was sort of designed, engineered out at this time. So they looked to move the funds to Overlook Drive. So as you can see, that's the far east or near Temple Terrace, and then moving the funds from design to construction. And this is a comparative report for that. And then the last amendment is a safety resurfacing along Hillsborough Avenue. This is one of the high severe crash corridors. So FDOT was able to get this project to move forward for safety. So if you have any questions, please let me know.
So moved.
With a motion by Commissioner Kemp, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Mechanic. Commissioner Overman, you recognize.
On the Amendment 7, where 19th Street has been eliminated, was there public comment or community input on that decision?
There was an overall study that identified possible locations for the crosswalks, and 19th and Overlook were both looked at that time. Because it became not feasible at this time to move forward with 19th, they are moved over to the next possible crosswalk.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? Any other questions? We have a motion by Commissioner Kemp, second by Mr. Mechanic, to approve the Transportation Improvement Program amendments. Any further discussion? All those in favor, let me know by saying aye. Pardon me? I'm sorry, roll call vote. My fault.
Mr. Anderson?
Yes.
Commissioner Kemp?
Yes.
Mr. Mechanic?
Yes.
Mr. Green?
Yes.
Mr. Hagan?
Yes.
Janet Sherburger?
Yes.
Karen Lott?
Yes.
Commissioner Miller?
Yes.
Councilman Vieira?
Yes.
Commissioner Overman?
Yes.
Councilman Maniscalco?
Yes.
Mr. Wagner?
Yes.
Commissioner Smith?
Yes.
Motion passes? Okay, thank you. All right, we're now moving to action items. The first is a letter of comments on Tampa Bay next sections 4 through 6, presentation of draft preferred alternative. Secretary Gwynn, good morning.
Good morning. I'd ask you to indulge me for about 15 minutes this morning. We have 2 videos we'd like to show you that's going to be the majority of this presentation. But today is pretty important. We're bringing to you the locally preferred alternative for the SEIS. Just a few comments ahead of the videos. First, FDOT began the SEIS study in early 2017. At that time, we committed to being engaged with the community and transparent in working to identify transportation solutions in the region. Over the past 2.5 years, we've continued our commitment of engagement by hosting community meetings, participating in community events, and meeting with neighborhood groups, stakeholders, and elected officials to hear feedback on our plans. We have provided updates to your board as well. Today is the 9th formal presentation to the board, but we also attend each month. We've also formally presented to committees 16 times, have attended the annual TIP hearings. This year, we also participated in 3 special briefings hosted by the MPO. These briefings were to provide committee members, board members, and the public additional opportunities to learn more about the SEIS project and specific areas of interest, including the social and community impacts, natural environment, and traffic and safety. We have been active in the community, engaging and incorporating feedback into our designs for the West Shore and downtown interchanges. We have heard from the residential and business communities the desire for the full reconstruction of the West Shore interchange with support for adding additional express lanes to provide reliable travel times. We have received nearly 30 letters of support from organizations from across the region emphasizing the project's importance. When we started the study, FDOT had one concept for the downtown interchange that had a very large footprint, requiring approximately 200 parcels of right-of-way acquisition. The community spoke out and we responded by developing 3 more options that were smaller in size and addressed traffic congestion and demand to varying degrees. We went from the original concept for the downtown interchange that identified over 200 parcels that would be impacted to the locally preferred alternative you'll see today that will impact fewer than 10 parcels. Today we are here because the study has progressed and FDOT has identified the locally preferred alternative for the study area, including the West Shore Interchange, downtown Tampa Interchange, and the corridor that connects them. We will be submitting the locally preferred alternative to Federal Highway Administration for their review. Through collaboration with agency partners, the community, and community leaders, we have developed a plan that balances the needs of different stakeholders, including the motoring public and the surrounding neighborhoods. This concept will help with traffic operations and reduce crashes and be an improvement from today, but is not the ultimate improvement that was originally shared. We have to balance impacts with adding capacity, which is a challenge in the urban core. I want to share 2 videos today that help to explain the proposed improvements and the locally preferred alternative for the downtown interchange. We will be moving forward recommending the full reconstruction of the West Shore interchange. The public has also been asking for better and more watchable videos to explain what we're doing. You'll see one today that is a little more technical that will provide you more information. You'll see a second that will be used primarily for public outreach in response to what we've been asked. One item I do want to note is that FDOT has made a decision to keep the ramps at Florabraska Avenue open. This is a change from what we have previously shown, which was closing the ramps and modifying access to and from local communities. Community leaders in East Tampa have been engaged with us and vocal about their desire for the ramps to remain, and we have responded in our updated design. So we'll go first. The first video is really the more technical video that will show you the specifics regarding to the locally preferred alternative design.
These visualizations are conceptual only and were created for the purpose of portraying the characteristics of the proposed improvements. Visualizations are subject to change as the project is still ongoing. Drivers experience congestion and high crash rates in the I-275-I-4 interchange caused by bottlenecks and high traffic volume. Backups along southbound I-275 occur as drivers exit to eastbound I-4 via the one-lane exit ramp. Westbound I-4 congestion occurs as drivers must quickly decide to exit to northbound I-275 towards the University of South Florida, exit to downtown Tampa, or continue southbound on I-275 towards the West Shore area. FDOT has been engaging with the community and stakeholders to develop long-term and short-term solutions to address our transportation needs. As the Tampa Interstate Study Supplemental Environmental Impact Statement, or SEIS, has progressed, FDOT has responded to community input by developing multiple build alternatives for the interchange. FDOT also heard the need to address safety and traffic operations, and this latest concept does just that. The proposed improvements for the I-275-I-4 interchange will enhance traffic operations and safety by addressing the existing bottlenecks and high crash rates within the interchange with minimal property acquisition, while still maintaining access to and from local communities. The improvements will be made to the movements from southbound I-275 to eastbound I-4, and from westbound I-4 to both northbound and southbound I-275. FDOT is planning to recommend these improvements to the Federal Highway Administration as part of the locally preferred alternative for the supplemental EIS. The first portion of the improvements is along southbound I-275 to eastbound I-4. Drivers along southbound I-275 experience congestion as they approach the exit ramp to I-4. To reduce congestion, an additional lane is being provided on the I-4 exit ramp. FDOT has heard from the community about the importance of keeping the exit ramp to Florabraska Avenue open. This access will remain like it is today. An additional access point to the community is available via a new exit ramp to 14th and 15th Streets. The existing one-lane exit ramp to I-4 has limited capacity, causing drivers to back up along the outside lane of I-275. Other drivers merge aggressively into the exit-only lane to I-4 at the last possible moment, causing safety concerns. Widening this exit ramp to 2 lanes will provide congestion relief. Drivers will be able to stay in the outside lane as they travel southbound from Hillsborough Avenue to the I-4 exit. The through lane from Hillsborough Avenue will be a choice lane, meaning it will split, allowing drivers in it to exit to I-4 or continue southbound on I-275. The outside lane from the on-ramp at Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard will remain like it is today. Drivers will use the widened 2-lane I-4 exit ramp to access the local communities via the new 14th and 15th Street exit ramp. Northbound I-275 drivers traveling from the West Shore area will also use the relocated exit to 14th and 15th Streets, located just north of Palm Avenue. And drivers will no longer have to merge onto eastbound I-4, then weave across lanes to exit to Ybor City. A traffic signal at 14th and 15th Streets and signage will direct traffic along the existing frontage road, or 13th Avenue, onward to 21st and 22nd Streets. The 13th Avenue frontage road will be widened to 2 lanes closer towards I-4 and away from existing buildings and structures. The 22nd Street on-ramp to eastbound I-4 will remain as it is today. The next portion of the improvements is from westbound I-4 to northbound I-275. Drivers along westbound I-4 also experience congestion in the I-275 I-4 interchange when they must decide whether to exit to northbound I-275, exit to downtown Tampa, or continue to southbound I-275 in a short time. This creates a bottleneck further east along I-4, which the proposed improvements will address. Westbound ramps at 21st and 22nd Streets will remain like they are today. The 1-lane ramp from westbound I-4 to northbound I-275 will be widened to 2 lanes. Additional merging lanes along northbound I-275 will give drivers extra time to enter the interstate. The existing on-ramp from Florabraska Avenue will remain, and the single-lane northbound exit to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard will be widened to a 2-lane exit. The next portion of the improvements is from westbound I-4 to southbound I-275. To address congestion from I-4 to southbound I-275 toward the West Shore area, the ramp will be widened to provide 3 lanes to southbound I-275. Within the interchange, 1 additional lane will be added. The exit to downtown Tampa will be shifted to improve spacing, making it easier to exit. The exit ramp will still provide drivers with the same direct access to downtown like today, but the existing ramp bridge structure over I-275 will be removed. Between Palm Avenue and Jefferson Street, the existing shoulders will be widened to full standard widths to improve safety, and the existing trail along the west side of I-275 will remain. Over the next few months, FDOT will continue to work with the Federal Highway Administration to complete the SEIS and a public hearing will be held so the community can learn more about the improvements and provide comments. The FDOT will work with adjacent communities and stakeholders to incorporate comments from the public hearing into the locally preferred alternative. Following the public hearing, FDOT and FHWA will issue a final.
The rest of it is more of a housekeeping. Now I have a shorter video that was basically prepared at the request of the public that asked us to make something a little more watchable. And see, so we wanted to share it to you since it will be presented to the public.
We all want safer roadways and a better transportation system. Well, the Florida Department of Transportation is looking for ways to help. Our roads and corridors are congested. Traffic, it's not getting any better. Heck, people are even cutting through neighborhoods just to get places faster. Can you imagine what this is going to be like with more and more people moving here every year? I sure can't. Does this look familiar? Ever been caught in traffic in the I-275, I-4 interchange in downtown Tampa? You know, good old malfunction junction? In 2012, there were over 500 crashes in the I-275, I-4 interchange. Fast forward to 2016, and it's doubled to over 1,000 crashes. We all want to arrive safely. FDOT's been looking at how to make that junction function through a study called the Tampa Interstate Study Supplemental Environmental Impact Statement. That is a mouthful, and it's just one piece of the transportation puzzle.
They had a plan, a big plan, and they shared it with the community. And they found out the community wanted something different, a plan with less neighborhood impacts requiring less property. So they got busy creating new plans, keeping what they heard in mind.
FDOT has been in the community, they've been at events and meetings, giving presentations, looking at ways to make your commute better and safer. Wouldn't it be nice if this could change? Well, there's a plan.
And it's the locally preferred alternative, improving traffic flow and safety, but with fewer impacts to local communities. A real balancing act.
Today, drivers stack up along I-275 waiting to exit to I-4, while others wait until the last minute, diving across traffic to their exit. Good old lane divers, you know? It's chaos. No wonder there are so many crashes. Each day, almost 85,000 vehicles travel along southbound I-275, with over 1/3 heading to I-4 in that one lane. Again, the backup each day. What if this exit was 2 lanes instead of 1? So traffic doesn't come to a stop and you could move through faster and safer. What if you weren't cut off and driving was a breeze? Look at how much better it would be with 2 lanes instead of 1. Getting to Ybor City in East Tampa today means going from I-275 to I-4 and then across traffic to an exit. And that is not always easy. How about a new exit to 14th and 15th Streets from I-275 instead of 21st Street from I-4? Imagine no more crossing lanes in I-4 to get your exit, keeping you safer, and the best part is, these improvements will get you there a whole lot easier. Stuck again on I-4 heading to Tampa? Well, so are close to 90,000 other drivers today, and traffic is at a standstill once again. Want to fix it? So does FDOT. Think of how much better it would be with 2 lanes heading to northbound I-275 towards USF and Busch Gardens instead of just 1. You'll have more time to merge onto I-275, and that sounds great to me. But hey, that's not all. An additional lane through the interchange to I-275 southbound will ease the backup. Getting to downtown Tampa becomes safer too. The ramp to downtown exits will be shifted, so there aren't 3 decisions to make at once. Plus, shoulders will be wider. You're dropped off at the same place in downtown, just like today. We all want safer roadways, quicker travel times, and an improved transportation system. Isn't it time we get this junction to function?
Okay, the last thing I want to share with you before I turn it over to you for any questions you may have, since we're not bringing express lanes through the downtown interchange, we have to figure out what do we do with them since they come through the West Shore interchange. So we've developed a plan to terminate those lanes. How do I transition between? Okay. So basically, we're going to continue to have express lane access at Himes, but it's only going to be to and from the west or the south. We won't have access actually going to the east or the north bound. So you'll see that will be one modification from what you've seen previously. The second is on northbound 275, drivers will be allowed to exit to Ashley both through general purpose lanes and through express lanes. So the express lanes will come through, come across, and go to downtown. And this would allow for access as we build segment 2 down in St. Pete for express lane connectivity between downtown Tampa all the way to downtown St. Pete and also to the express lanes with the Veterans Expressway. There will be no loss of access. One thing you'll notice is that we no longer have ramps at the North Boulevard. There's no on or off ramps there. So in coming southbound, you'll be able to get on from Ashley. You'll be able to continue southbound in both general purpose and express lanes. And so essentially what we're doing is we're terminating and adding the express lanes from the Ashley area. So from downtown, you'll be able to get in express lanes going towards St. Pete. Obviously, there's no express lanes that'll be going further towards I-4. So the last 2.5 years has been a lot of effort on the part of a lot of people. This is our locally preferred alternative. We'll be submitting that to the Federal Highway Administration for their review, and hopefully we'll have a record of decision within the next year. We're also very actively pursuing funding for the West Shore interchange, and we're hopeful that we can pull that project in, but we've just got to work with our finance people to figure out how to make that happen. So with that, I'll pass it, I guess, back to you, sir, if you have any questions.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Secretary. I have a couple of questions. I see that you all have done a lot of work on trying to relieve some of the congestion on I-4, I-275, and Malfunction Junction. The first one is, are you closing 21st Street exit that when you travel east on I-4, are you closing that? Are you relocating it? 21st,
No,
22nd?
what will happen is, if you're familiar now, if you come southbound on 275 and you want to get off at 21st, 22nd, you basically have to weave across all the I-4 lanes. And if you're coming northbound on, call it northbound on 275, to go eastbound on I-4, you're crossing in the opposite direction. So you've got that big weave and merge right there. What this does is takes all those movements off onto that parallel ramp system that'll be just to the south of the mainline lanes. You'll be able on eastbound to get off at 14th, 15th, but we're also widening the frontage road, and it will take you all the way down to 21st, 22nd. So you'll be able to get still to 21st, 22nd through the off-ramp, but you'll have the ability to also get off at 14th, 15th.
Okay, all right. The next question is alleviating the congestion from I-275 headed south on the I-4. You're going to double those, you're going to make those 2 lanes. Am I right?
There'll be 2 lanes from southbound 275 to eastbound I-4 and from westbound I-4 to northbound 275, and there'll be additional lane from westbound I-4 to southbound 275.
How are you going to handle those that get on southbound I-275 and Martin Luther King when they have to cross over? You're still going to have traffic going on I-4, but you're going to have people that come on I-270, come on Martin Luther King headed south on I-275 still have to get over. Am I correct?
What we're doing is we're providing an additional lane. You'll have the ability, all you'll have to do is move over 1 lane, which is essentially what you have to do today. Move over 1 lane to get into the lane that will go further to the south if you didn't want to jump onto the I-4 ramp, because that lane that we're building is going to be a choice lane, if you would. You can go to I-4 or you can keep going further to the south.
That's a lane that you pray with your eyes open.
Yeah.
That's for sure.
I'll be the first to admit, is this a geometric masterpiece? Is this solving all the problems? No. What this is was a balancing act between what we were hoping would both address the significant issues out there, but at the same time not have a 200 parcel impact on right-of-way. So it's certainly not perfect from that perspective.
My next question is, when you're coming south on I-4, getting in the lane to go north on I-275, okay? You're going to make that 2 lanes.
Make it 2 lanes, and you won't have to move over before you get to MLK like you do today. You'll be able to keep going north all the way past Hillsborough.
And I understand that you're going to keep Florabraska entrance onto I-275 north there. But
Yes.
the major dangerous problem is when people come on I-275 from Florabraska, they have to get over. So they're not getting off of Martin Luther King. They want to get over on 275. But you got the lanes from Martin Luther King there. So they're coming and trying to exit Martin Luther King. You got cars trying to cross over to get on I-275. Major problem. What's happening there?
Yeah. Well, the way we've got the lanes lined up, you will still have to move over a lane. The volumes from Florabraska, quite honestly, are fairly low.
But not in the afternoons, it's not low.
Well, it's fairly low compared to like other interchanges in the area. What we had proposed, we had talked to the leaders, a lot of the leaders in East Tampa. What we had previously proposed was to, instead of having the on-ramp at Florabraska, was to move it to 14th, 15th. So what would happen is you'd come down to 14th, 15th, and you'd have a ramp that would go from 14th, 15th. You wouldn't be able to get on I-4, but you would be able to come around and get on I-275 north. And that was what we had proposed. Based on the feedback we got, and we had our folks do some modeling of how will it work operationally, we feel that it could work. Now, we always, as the DOT, reserve the right that if there becomes a safety problem at any of our locations, we go back and we can change it. But what we said is we're willing to give it a shot. Our models show that there are probably not going to be significant issues, and so we're willing to give that a shot.
My last comment is when you're heading north on I-275 and that Florabraska exit, a lot of people get in that lane, that last lane. That's the exit to Martin Luther King, and at the last minute they realize, I'm on the exit lane. I got to get back over. Major problem.
Yeah, and that lane now will go all the way up past Hillsborough.
That's my piece. Commissioner Overman, you recognize.
Yeah, we live and breathe in that area. It's so much fun. I did like seeing more of the changes that you've heard. I do still have a couple of questions on the exit ramp that meets 14th and 15th. You show lights there. Will they be no right turn on red?
I don't think we've gotten to the point yet. We'd have to look at things like sight distance and volumes and all of
Okay.
that.
But I highly recommend eliminating a right turn on red on that intersection because you basically, no one will stop. No one will actually stop and then make the right because they're coming off of an interstate onto a local street. While it's designed much more like a parkway, it does cross a trail, it does cross bike paths, and it will be a source of pedestrian and cyclist injury. So eliminating the right turn on red onto Nucio Parkway, I think is going to be a recommendation to eliminate the impact of unsafe drivers, basically, because that's just an unsafe practice, but people do it all the time. Secondarily, I was curious if there's going to be improvement on the signage on southbound, on the north side of southbound, traveling southbound on 275. Part of the problem, even though you will end up with 2 lanes, and you've got people coming on it at MLK, which is really frightening, and then getting off at Florabraska, is that the roller coaster ride does prohibit line of sight for those people who actually don't know our roads. It's not just our local drivers that do the dodgeball, kill people action, but the roller coaster ride does make it difficult to know. There's the lane. Has there been or would there be inclusion in signage at, say, Sly and Hillsborough that indicates that those 2 lanes are exit only for I-4?
Yeah, when we do the final design, we'll have, and the good thing with this design, right now, if you go north to MLK, all you can say is stay to the right, because that lane for I-4 doesn't even start till after you get past MLK. And so that's part of the problem is you've got people backed up from that one-lane ramp past MLK, and so you got to try to get over when you can.
Right.
And now, most days, it's not just one lane, it's 3 lanes trying to
Agreed.
move over.
I
So with the
just
2
ran.
lanes, and the good thing is that since we're going to take that lane that goes to I-4 north of Hillsborough, you can put a sign there, I-4, this lane,
Yeah.
and they can get it. So there'll be a lot better opportunities to give advance warning and get people in the right lanes.
That would be highly recommended, yeah. Thank you very much, I appreciate that. I also noticed that it looks like on page 6 of the handout that you provided us, there was an indication that looks like there's only one taking of a property on the south, on page 5, on the south side in Ybor, off of, north of Palm. But there's 10 properties on the north side. Are any of those actual single-family homes? And what's the plan for assisting those residents for relocation?
It's actually down to 6 now. When we left the Florabraska ramps open, it decreased that extra lane that we were going to provide. So 6. Many of them are in between properties we already own. So it's sort of like, we never did any eminent domain on this whole acquisition. Everything was willing sellers. And so we would work with those property owners to work with them. There are a lot of benefits that DOT provides for relocation assistance, as well as being able to work with them on the purchase of the property. And so, yes, it's 7 total properties, I believe, that we need to acquire.
Right, the reason I'm asking is that there's such a lack of affordable housing in that area, and prices have become incredibly difficult for a new family. A family that's been there forever, that had homestead, that's now buying a new home. Their property taxes triple because they've been there for a long time, and they can't find a place to stay in their own community. So I'm not sure what FDOT's benefits are, but they need to take that impact into consideration.
No, and we did.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Mechanic, you recognize.
Mr. Gwynn, the agenda is talking about segments 4, 5, and 6. You really only mentioned changes in the downtown interchanges. Should I assume that the other segments are not being changed from what you've previously presented?
Correct. The West Shore interchange and the segment in between will remain as been shown essentially the whole time. And the only thing that is different is we're terminating the express lanes at Ashley as opposed to bringing them through the downtown interchange.
Any other questions? Commissioner Smith, you recognize.
Thank you. And I'm glad to see more responses to some of the neighborhood and community concerns, like keeping Florabraska open. The tolled expressway that dumps at Ashley, concerns about bottlenecks at that point?
Not really. I mean, our modeling shows that it'll work. It's, again, if we wanted to provide the best congestion relief overall without any other factors being taken into account, you'd probably have seen something like the option A that was the original option. But we understand it's not, we're not operating in a vacuum and without, being able or having to take into account what the impacts are outside of our footprint. And so that's why you see the reduced footprint. So is it perfect from a traffic and congestion standpoint? No, but is it a vast improvement? Yes.
And a good compromise?
Correct.
One more, the properties that you own maybe were acquired in anticipation of a much larger footprint. Any idea what the plan would be for those long-term, since you no longer need them?
Yeah, that's something we're going to have to look further into. I mean, we're still not at the point where we've gotten a record of decision. We have been worked very closely with Federal Highway Administration, and we feel that they will favorably approve this plan. Once we get through that process, we can look at what properties are remaining that we don't need and see what we can do with that.
And so, last question, what's the timeline then for community input and finalizing this?
We'll be having community meetings between now and probably February. We'll have the public hearing in February. that'll be the formal public hearing where people can come in and make their comments on the record. That will be kind of the final step before it goes to final approval by the Federal Highway Administration.
Thank you.
Mr. Kemp, be recognized.
Thank you. I just want to say I'm very pleased that North Boulevard is no longer being considered an option for putting traffic on. To me, that was a nightmare scenario with all the walkable and high school and universities there and everything. So I'm glad that that has been moved. Times is a more appropriate street. Let's see, there was something, well, as you know, I'm still very much opposed to the widening on segment 7. I know we didn't talk about this, but adding 2 12-foot lanes to segment 7, north part of I-275, I can only imagine is going to be a really awful thing for how the traffic moves and the danger, safety, and design and everything else of these roads, and that it will impact all of this. But I think that is, I just hope that can be reconsidered at some point, because that is, we have the roadbed there that's already not being used, which I can see is fine to be used, but I think that needs to be reconsidered in this design. I also have just one question that's off point here, but last night I came in from the airport, and the cab I was in had, they couldn't get onto 275 from the airport. You had to go across the bridge to St. Pete and turn around. That's what everybody had to do, and because of construction. So I'm just wondering if how long that's going to last for, or what, and if that was totally necessary.
Go all the way across the bridge?
Yeah, everybody did. Everybody was going over to St. Pete and turning around. Cars, everybody had to.
I'll have to check on that.
Thank you.
That would not be a detour that we do have a couple of things going on right now. We have the extra lane that's being added on 60 coming into the interchange.
Right.
And then we also are now doing the bridge work where we are doing some of the bridge work for the punch-through project for the additional lanes on 275. And as part of that, we had detours established, but they were supposed to be using roads like Boy Scout and others in the general area. The other thing is that they're only supposed to be doing that between 11 p.m. and 4 a.m., and I think the airport asked us to not go past 4 a.m. because of the post office and some other things. But
this was about 9:45.
I think it's 9. I think it's 9.
yeah, I'll check on that. In fact, Al from the airport called us this morning to check on it. So I didn't have time to get with my guys, but typically we would not send you across Howard Franklin Bridge.
Right. I just was really shocked.
So
I couldn't really believe
the
it was
Uber driver
happening.
didn't know where, or the taxi
But everybody
guy wanted
over
a little
there
more
was
money, or
turning
what?
around.
Did you have to pay for that?
Well, I actually gave him extra money because he was like,
That was his
Yeah,
intent.
that would not have been the detour.
I felt bad
put
for
in, but
him.
If you get caught in that, I could see how somebody could get caught and go take a wrong turn, and then you end up.
it was
coming in.
terrible. I mean, it was.
I
it was.
apologize for that. We'll work
no,
on
I
it.
just thought somebody should look into it because I couldn't really believe that it was happening.
Yeah, we'll look at that because we definitely don't want people to do that.
Thank you.
Councilman Maniscalco, you recognized.
Yeah, I also received a phone call around 10 o'clock from a friend of mine. And he said, who's handling this detour? I'm having to go all the way to St. Pete just to, make a turn to go off to, I think it was coming off the causeway at, when you can get on Kennedy and whatnot and 275. So I said, well, tomorrow morning I have an MPO meeting and guess who's going to be there.
When we get done here, I'll look into it because that typically when there's a detour, it comes to me for approval if it's a detour.
Okay.
And I don't remember seeing anything that would have taken them across Howard Franklin. So I'll have to figure out if we didn't get the signage up right or if the contractor didn't get it implemented the correct way or what. But we'll definitely look into that.
All right.
Closure it starts at 9 p.m.
9 p.m.?
Yeah.
And I think there's some additional ones that will close the some of the portions of I-275 because we're widening the bridges through there. We have to cut off parts of the existing bridge so we can widen it. Can't do that over traffic. But all of that work will be done between 11 and 4. So I'll have to check on that.
Okay.
It's done before next week because I'm flying out and back. So.
Tell me what day. I'll make sure it's open.
Any other questions?
Take an alternate route.
Mr. Secretary, thank you.
All right,
Appreciate
thank
it.
Very much.
Mr. Clarendon. MPO Comments, draft letter.
morning, members of the board. Rich Clarendon, I'm the Assistant Director of the MPO. So we just heard the latest from the Florida Department of Transportation, and the comments that I'm going to present to you predate this. So they may be, some of the comments may be a little bit moot at this stage, but I'm going to go through it just because there's a lot here to unpack. And as the Secretary has indicated, this represents a lot of work and frankly, a lot of work on the part of our committees. We appreciate the departments being willing to share a lot of information, specifically with our committees. So, as has been already said, this project focuses on two major interchange reconstructions or improvements. In the West Shore area, there are really only two options. One is to build, the other is no further action. In the downtown interchange, there were 4 build options, A through D. I guess those are off the table now. No further action is still an option. But the preferred alternative, we just heard, is the short-term safety and operational, what we've called colloquially the quick fix. In the West Shore area, this would rebuild the interchange to accommodate 2 tolled express lanes in each direction, connecting them to the Veterans and the Howard Franklin Bridge, providing for direct access to the airport, new underpasses that I'll go over in a minute, express lane access at Rio and Himes, providing for a transit envelope on I-275, total cost of about $1.6 billion. These are the underpasses that I referred to at Rio, Occident, and Trask. So those are new. I won't really spend any time on the downtown options. The short-term operational and safety quick fix was the subject of the video, so I probably don't need to go over those in a whole lot of detail. I did want to, though, talk a little bit about how we did evaluate the supplemental environmental impact statement because we had some pretty clear guidance from this board dating back to 2016 and 17 in the form of motions. We did bring some other observations from a staff perspective and from a series of briefings intergovernmentally with both the City of Tampa, Hillsborough County, and the DOT, as well as a series of 3 open houses that the department was kind enough to put on for us and our committees. So the first part of the motions that have been made in the past deal with the human impact, basically talking about parcels needed for right-of-way, relocated homes and businesses, and affordable housing. In the West Shore area, it seems like most of the right-of-way has already been acquired. No more homes need to be acquired. 21 businesses need to be relocated. Downtown, this was the matrix from the 4 build options. Potentially, it could have been upwards of 300 residential relocations and 52 business relocations. I won't go through the locations of those, but those are available for those who want. This is a map, I think it was the same presentation that you saw in the video, showing the parcels that have already been acquired in the purple color, and then sort of, I guess, the lighter magenta color parcels to be acquired, and they're mostly on the northeast side of the interchange. We are concerned because this is a low-income area. There are populations that we need to pay special attention to. The department has said relocation assistance is available for displaced persons and businesses. And this basically comes down to finding comparable dwellings, purchase price subsidies, and moving cost reimbursements. We are still concerned, however, with potential impacts on affordable housing, and we would like to see where people have been relocated so far, and that information has yet to be provided. So that would be a request to the department. Another part of the motion dealing with human impacts is all of the environmental impact studies documenting impacts, and there's a raft of them. I won't go over each one of these, but they're all available online, covering everything from parks to cultural resources, archaeological resources, natural resources, water quality, et cetera. We are concerned about the mitigating impacts that result from the construction itself. So one of the comments from your technical advisory committee is if there are noise barriers that are going to be provided, perhaps those could be built first. That is a form of mitigating against construction impacts. We also think that considering smart work zones, using technology and driver information to provide for the continued flow of traffic during construction, detours notwithstanding, perhaps would be beneficial here. We think that it's important to clarify and pin down the location of the noise barriers, which we've been told are likely. We don't know exactly to and from where, so that's something that would need to be detailed during the design phase. And last but not least, one of the comments that came from the committees was to protect the I-275 State Road 60 West Shore interchange against potential inundation and flooding and the damage that could result from storm surge, for example. Another motion, part of the motion had to do with the justification for toll lanes. And there is a traffic and revenue study that is available that shows information like this, basically the toll lane volumes as a percent of the total volumes. And it ranges from anywhere from, on the low side, less than 10%, on the high side, up to 30% of all traffic during the peak periods. This just shows the potential difference between travel speeds predicted with no further action in the general use lanes. Those would be the general purpose lanes, and then in the toll lanes. And you can see that the speeds do go up, comparing one to the other. The predicted delay per vehicle mile is something else that is in the documentation. This just shows the differences between the different build options. We don't have information on the delay per vehicle mile for the quick fix, because that, I think, was a late addition, but that would be something that I'm sure we could request from the department. One of the things that is of concern, however, is sort of the equity impacts from toll lanes. We do know that from other case studies, there are potential impacts from electronic tolling, which I think would be the method of collecting tolls on the toll lanes. Impacts to low-income populations who perhaps don't maintain a credit card account or maybe don't have a bank account to draw upon electronically. There are ways that can mitigate against those impacts through fee waivers, alternative payment methods. We have pay by plate, for example, waivers for transit, carpool, van pools. And then if there are excess toll revenues, which we don't know if there will be, but reinvesting those back into the community, perhaps in the form of additional transit. One other thing we'd like to do is to know what the proposed toll rate policy is when and if it is implemented. A part of the motion was to follow up with a report on premium transit. This came to you a couple years ago in the Regional Transit Feasibility Plan, which is largely focused and is now being pursued as the I-275 Express bus system, which is something, as was pointed out to us, was never endorsed by this board. So we would like to see a more robust consideration of the other catalyst that was noted in this study, the CSX lines. There was a civil rights investigation because there was a complaint filed, and that was dismissed by FHWA in 2018. Property tax revenue loss due to right-of-way acquisition, again, based on the full build option, so perhaps it's moot at this point. Most of the parcels acquired or in the West Shore area have been acquired or under contract. The analysis for the full build option, however, that was done for the community redevelopment agencies, estimated an initial loss of about $14,000 per year in TIF revenues for the first 4 years, and then property values would rebound and annual gains in the next 4 years after that, going from $348,000 to $788,000. This was from a study that the department commissioned TBRPC, the Regional Planning Council, to conduct. So we would just like to see updated estimates based on the preferred alternative when those can be provided by the department. Cost to the city for operating and maintaining any community impact mitigation. So that we know that the department is working with the city on features that could be a local responsibility. This often comes down to landscaping, for example, or other design features that might require local impact, local upkeep. We would like to know during the design phase what those might be and what the cost estimates for those are. Air quality is another major concern. Now, there was modeling done for all of the alternatives, including the no further action and the build options. All were predicted to produce carbon monoxide at rates that were less than the national standard of 35 parts per million. Compared to the no further action, the build options were predicted to produce lower carbon monoxide levels at all the intersections that were analyzed, except for the 2 that are mentioned here. Again, I think this is something that probably needs to be revisited in light of the preferred alternative. We do know that mobile source air toxics, which is a fancy word for saying other chemicals that are produced from burning fuel. We do know that the tailpipe standards that will be in place or are expected to be in place for new vehicles are expected to reduce mobile source air toxics by as much as 90% by 2050. That's regardless of which alternative is selected. That would apply across the board. You can see the impact that produces. We are concerned, obviously, with the impact of the air toxics. You can see that they are lower under the build. Again, I don't have information on the preferred alternative. We do know, however, that this area has a higher incidence of asthma and chronic diseases, right in the middle of this urban core. So we feel like it's still a concern of this MPO, and we would request that during the design phase, mitigation such as construction mitigation, green noise walls, and greater landscaping that might provide for some filtration would be beneficial. We do have a number of other concerns related to safety, especially for vulnerable users, bicyclists and walkers, particularly at exit ramps. We know from past history these are danger zones for folks on foot or on bicycles trying to navigate traffic that's exiting at fairly high speeds. So we would like to see a request a presentation on the new and reconfigured ramps at some point in the future. We would like, during the design phase, that strategies to slow traffic down through signage, flashing beacons, rumble strips, high visibility marking, and perhaps prohibition of right-hand turns on red at some of these locations. Now, obviously, North Boulevard is off the table at this point, but these other exit ramps still remain a concern. No new ramps on North Boulevard. I think we just heard the department say that that's going to be the case. We would like to see some clarification of what bicycle and pedestrian facilities will be provided on some of the side streets that would take additional traffic. Some of them are mentioned here: Rio Street, Lemon Street, East Frontage Road in the West Shore area. And lastly, in terms of bicycle and pedestrian travel, we request that during the next phase, the design phase, consideration be given to closing some gaps in the trail and greenway system for the safety, and address the safety of cyclists and walkers using those facilities. This is a little hard to see, but essentially everything that's in the light green already exists. What's in the purple and the red have yet to be constructed, and we'd like to see some of these connections being made as part of the next phase. I don't think I need to go over this since it has to do with the closure of Flora-Braska Avenue, but that's obviously a concern of the East Tampa Revitalization Partnership. They were concerned with some other things relating to improved lighting, signals, crosswalks, sidewalks, and landscaping on some adjacent roads, Nebraska and 21st Avenue. I know the department has been in discussions with the partnership, and we'd just like to be brought up to speed on those discussions. We would lastly like to see a timeline for all the community enhancements proposed as part of the Heights Mobility Study, which is, again, very close to the downtown interchange. And last but not least, as was brought up by Mr. Roberts as part of the CAC report, we'd like to see a more robust analysis of induced traffic. There is some mention made in some of the documentation, but it's fairly limited, looking primarily at what would be induced within the study area. We'd like to see that extended to what is the broader impact on regional land use patterns outside of the study area and traffic coming into the area. So that's basically it. This just kind of recaps what I've just said, and I'd be happy to answer any questions. We would recommend that you have a letter go to the department, just going on record for these concerns.
Okay, let me ask you a question. There were some of the things you had in that draft letter that's been addressed already. Are we still, do you need to go back and work on that and bring this back, or what are your thoughts?
I think that would be at the pleasure of this board. We can certainly take out references to things like North Boulevard, since that's no longer on the table. And I think that would probably be something we would do anyway. So I guess my suggestion would be, if you're comfortable with us having make those edits, we'd be happy to do that.
So you suggest we make a motion today to allow you to draft the letter and take out those issues that have already been addressed?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
So moved.
There's a motion by Ms. Hold on, I'm gonna get to you. Hold tight, okay? Motion by whatever your name is.
Stewart.
Who seconded it?
Stewart.
Councilman
Citro.
Citro. Okay. Questions? Motion can't be recognized.
Thank you. Yeah, a couple of the edits I'm concerned about. Flora-Braska, I think, is an obvious one. But I think that there was something in there saying that the air issues would be, according to our modeling, that air pollution or concerns could be mitigated by widening the road. I guess it's kind of what the response is in there. And I just wanted to say, just in general terms, one is that I had, and I have expressed concerns about this because there has been watershed studies done in just the last few years about air quality. If we saw the map, I think that that's really important. But the other thing you said is tailpipe emissions would go down by 90%. I've thought that electric cars would be, which I do believe will be, will be much more robust in the future, if not total electric cars or electric vehicles. But what I've learned now is that a huge part of the dangerous particulate matter and pollution comes actually from tires and brake dust, and that is extremely toxic and horrible, and that will not change. And that we also, as you said, noted that there huge exposure for asthma, cardiovascular disease, even seeing cancer and dementia. So I'm just concerned about that in particular, and that reference in the letter that kind of minimizes the impacts of expanding I-275 north of downtown, and saying that somehow those air quality impacts won't, we will not be that extreme.
Okay. Someone you recognize.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate a lot of the comments that were made in here, especially adding the issue associated with readdressing the premium transit study and making sure that CSX as a regional project is something that is brought back to the table as far as our long-term plan. But in relationship to the air quality concerns, item 7 talks about the cost to the city for operation and maintenance of community impact mitigation. Community impact mitigation oftentimes requires the city to cover the cost and maintain the actual landscaping that actually is one of the primary methods, other than noise walls, of addressing the environmental impacts. So our policy as a state, I believe, and please correct me if I'm wrong, is that the FDOT negotiates with the municipalities to offload the responsibility of maintaining the landscaping, which is one of the primary methods of addressing air quality and impact. And I would like to find a way to readdress that relationship, because if we can't, if the city is unable, cities, and I'm not talking about just Tampa, but Plant City and all of our communities that are smaller budgets, smaller tax revenue bases, that are actually being the primary mitigator of the environmental impact, there's something wrong with the policy. So in this particular item 7 and 8, if there's any addressing of the issues here, would be to address the fact that the municipality is unable to actually own that environmental impact that FDOT should. It's not really stated here, but we've asked them to address the environmental impact and the health policies. And as one who lives where there's braking and tires and, exhaust sitting in traffic, and absolutely understands the environmental impact of living along an interstate and that impact, having large, mature, quality landscaping matters along our corridors, and palm trees just don't do it. Maybe they do, but I think it would be important for us to readdress the issue when we're talking about the cost to city of our operation and maintenance of community impact mitigation, that conversation be in direct correlation with the environmental impacts associated with roads that go through municipalities, and as it pertains to our particular project, because we know that maintaining these roads and these highways and these overpasses is a burden that municipalities wrestle with. And I think, honestly, if the FDOT brings the road through the middle of our communities, that FDOT should actually take care of that, just like they do when they resurface those roads and then redesign them when they're over capacity. So I don't know where to put that or make it a motion in addition to this, but I think it does need to be addressed, either at a local level or at the state level.
So Alden, you want to address that?
Sure, just a brief response if I could. So you directed us at the end of the public hearing in June to look into options for how noise walls can be designed to have as much benefit as possible for community health and reducing the spread of emissions. So we are planning to come back to you with some best practice case studies from around the country and from around the world. We've already been talking with the District 7 staff about that. So we are going to continue to have a dialogue about how those strategies can be integrated into this project going forward, and expect to see that on a future agenda.
Okay, and that addresses noise.
And it
Noise walls,
specifically,
landscaping as well?
addresses air quality. So
Okay.
how can those barriers do more for public health?
Okay. But I'm also concerned about tree canopies and ways that we can use environmental methods to actually improve our air quality when we have a highway running through the middle of a municipal area. So,
And that will be part of it.
all right, thank you very much for your help. I appreciate it.
Councilman Citro, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to thank Commissioner Overman for bringing that up. I also have constituents calling me with their concerns about junk, trash, and debris on the entrance ramps and exit ramps, and I'm trying to find out exactly who to go to. So if that can also be brought up, see who maintains, who upkeep, whether it's FDOT, whether it's the City of Tampa, whether it's Hillsborough County. I'd just like to get some information on that also. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Green, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm not sure if this came up when I stepped out for a moment, but item number 6, which deals with fiscal impact analysis. And this was done, was this done prior to option E, which the Secretary
Yes. Yes, sir.
outlined earlier? Will that be updated?
The motion we have right now is to allow staff to draft the letter and make modifications concerning the presentation that we got from the Secretary this morning.
Thank you.
Any other questions? We have a motion by School Board Member Stewart, second by City Councilman Citro.
Question.
I'm sorry, I
Sorry.
didn't see your hand.
Yeah, I know, I just put it up there. Is the motion just to amend the letter or to amend it and send it on?
Motion's amended and send it.
Yeah, because the time is closing. So I support the motion with the understanding that we're going to be addressing the expanded pollution causes in things like particulate matter that is in the letter, and that will move on to address financing of the landscaping and walls in the city. But I just wanted to point out that we had a really excellent letter of input from the East Tampa Community Revitalization Partnership that raised a lot of concerns. So I just want to tell everybody that was discussed thoroughly in the policy committee, and many of those points were implemented in our response. So we went through a lot of work on that at the policy committee, and I'm really pleased with this meaty letter and response back to FDOT. So I just wanted the community to know that they were incorporated into this letter too. Yeah, thanks.
Any other comments or questions or concerns? Again, we have a motion by School Board Member Stewart, second by City Councilman Citro. Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor, let it be known by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed likewise. Motion is adopted.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Moving to draft 2045 cost feasibility plan. Silva.
Almost there, almost there.
Okay, Lisa Silva, MPO staff. I'm going to go over the survey results. It's a little anticlimactic because you just heard a lot of things, but I'll remind you there was a hurricane, and I was supposed to be here last month, but there's good news, and it's important to understand what the community said regardless. So we had 5,200 responses, so we're very pleased about that. Public transit continued to be a high priority. I'll tell you a little bit about, well, you know why we do this. We have to update our plan every 5 years to adopt our plan. This is where we're at in the process. I'll remind you, we had phase 1, which was the regional It's Time Tampa Bay survey last year, and we took a lot of that information, designed our second phase, which is It's Time Hillsborough, which was specific to the major projects and things that we needed further refinement and specific input. We've used the feedback we got from the community, plus lots of the science and the data and the modeling and lots of things that you'll hear about next to develop the draft plan. We're headed to the adoption hearing on November 5th at 6 p.m. Okay, so what we heard in the regional phase of It's Time Tampa Bay, that reducing congestion, alternatives to driving, protecting our established neighborhoods, strengthening downtowns, continuing to explore technologies, and minimizing outward growth was the basis of all 3 counties, Pasco and Pinellas included. We had approximately 10,000 response in that tri-county effort. We took some specifics from that to design our second phase, including bus rapid transit. We had a screen on bus rapid transit where they were asked to prioritize that. Rail and walk-bike alternatives and water ferry were something we wanted to get further refinement on for the major investments screen. And then, as you know, our downtown interchange had had hours and hours of public comment, so we wanted to get further refinement so we would know how to deal with that difficult challenge. I reminded everybody when we went out to the public that we have more than just the major investments already included in the plan, so they knew that the different programs were there. How we designed the engagement was to maximize what dollars we have to spend on these types of efforts. So we partnered with our local media outlets to help leverage that exposure, lots of interviews and radio partners, used a kickoff event out in the suburbs because that's where we're wanting to refine and get that input on those major investments for those communities. Went to a couple of major events, and we use incentives again. So having all 3 sporting entities in our Tampa Bay area tickets available to help incentivize people to complete the survey. We analyze each outreach effort we do to design and make them more effective in the next go-round. We learned that social media was definitely our friend, more so than we could ever imagine in phase 1 and in our previous 2040 outreach effort. So we used it heavily in this phase. I even discovered that Facebook is not the fossil that like you might hear when you listen to the youngers of ours community, because we had a lot of traffic from Facebook. So we used that, but we didn't ignore the others, Instagram, LinkedIn, et cetera, et cetera. So we did offer and extend invitations to all the groups to host presentations to help them walk through the events. What we did in this effort, as we always do, but we try to really intensify that, is to impact our communities of concern. So those communities with elderly, youth, 0 vehicle households, low income, limited English proficiency, et cetera. Or the darker blue areas, so that's where we target our efforts. We also had our first ride-alongs. We partnered with HEART, and they allowed us to bring our iPad surveys and paper surveys right onto the bus, and we had everyone on the bus participate that was willing for 9 different routes, and they were the ones that traversed most of our communities of concerns. There's a packed room up in the Keystone, Odessa area of one of our events. We did use MetroQuest again. It's an online engagement tool. It is not scientifically, statistically significant, but it is what we've found as the most effective tool to reach the most people in the most comfortable way. They can do it any time of day, take as long as they want to provide detailed feedback to understand each and every question. And did I mention we had 10,000 last time, 5,000 this time? So that's a lot more than you would see at a public hearing. We have packed rooms, as you guys are painfully aware, at our public hearings, but we get about 100 participants at that. This way we had, thousands of participants. So we still find it one of the best tools in the toolbox. So those that participated, I told you the exact number of responses. We looked at where they came from. Those that provided zip codes on the demographics screen, 89% were residents of our county, 90% were workers of our county. There were 93,000 data points for us to analyze and use when we developed the long-range plan. And we had over 3,000 individual comments that we got to sort through and see specifically what they're saying about each specific inquiry. This is a representation of where that 89% and 90% response rate is throughout our county. So we like to see that we have blue spread out on all the corners of the county. So we see that reaching out all over was successful. This tells you a little bit about those that answered the question on the fifth screen about demographics. We're still getting more than our census data is of the higher income and less of the lower income, so we still strive to improve upon that as we design the next ones. We did improve in this area. That strong focus on communities of concern did have us improve significantly over the 2040 initiative and over the Phase 1 initiative to the Phase 2 initiative. So last summer to this summer, we increased almost by double if you compare the to the 2040 efforts. So, yay. Okay, this is what we asked about the bus rapid transit corridors. They were asked to drag and drop 5 corridors above the line and put them in order. And this is what they had to say. So you can look at the orange is the popularity, so the frequency of how many times a particular corridor was chosen and drug above the line. And then the blue is the ranked rating of in what order they chose to put it above the line. So you can see that US 301 corridor is highly ranked, but low popularity. Conversely, we have the Dale Mabry corridor, which very popular, ranked very frequently, but less popular. This helps us when we go to design those bus rapid transit feasibility studies with our partners at HART. This screen had all the major projects. There were 15 of them. You were to click on the colored box and give it a yes, no, or no vote at all. Those were the options. And they were major transit projects and roadway projects and bus or trails. So this is a bit much to digest, so I'll walk you through it. So the yellow is those that gave it a yes. So if they gave it a yes, the frequency of yes, it's ranked in that order. So from most positive to least. Then over is the blue, those that gave it a no, that went out of their way to vote against the project are over there. Then the those that abstained and just didn't vote at all on a particular major investment is the gray. So you can kind of see like, oh, less voting on the water transit, but those that did gave it positive results. I'm not going to walk you through every single one. I'm going to hit a couple. So the first one was reusing freight rail tracks or our CSX corridors. And you can see that it was ranked very positively, and it was positive, very intense throughout the county pretty much, except in our outer corners. So, and then here we have one of the roadway projects. You might think, oh, in the rankings it was like at the bottom of the chart, but no, let's look where it would be beneficial. And in the Plant City community, it's very positively supported. They understand the projects and they supported the projects. If that was the opposite, we would know we'd have something to look at there. We had this for each one. Then we had those, did I mention 3,000 comments to go digest and look through. So we have supporters and non-supporters for the different things. So supporters of widening and adding new roads, cited congestion relief, especially if they included bike ped improvements. Some supported adding new roads but not widening those. The non-supporters believe the funding would be better spent on our other modes of transportation. Non-supporters cited the safety for the vulnerable, like pedestrian and cyclists, is a concern. And some are suggested restricting development until infrastructure improved, especially in the rural areas. For express lanes, the proponents commented that the revenue can be generated and reinvested. Others cited that that's a congestion reduction tool and able to move everybody faster, especially if BRT lines are the reasons. And then opponents cited equity as a major concern, and that said some express lanes are underutilized. Then the right sizing of Tampa streets, the proponents cited the safety and the dedicated transit lanes opportunities. Opponents cited the concerns about congestion and suggested just rerouting to smaller parallel streets. For reusing the freight rail tracks, it was very popular by the majority. Most of them, commenters suggested putting a BRT line along right away and cited concerns about low ridership, the opponents there. So the trails, the extensions were very popular for improved quality of life issues and serving many uses, including to tourism and recreation. Many suggested improving connectivity to the trails and to mass transit. And then opponents stated that other projects should be prioritized first. So water transit supporters were excited about the prospect of a new commute option and reducing congestion on the bridges. Dissenters cited concerns about operational costs and pricing connections from the ports and the city, arguing that water transit is a tourist service. Extending the streetcar had 85% support as a priority. Opponents said that streetcar is outdated and too expensive. On rapid transit connecting downtown and Tampa to the airport, it was very popular. Most supported rail over bus for that type of mode. Opponents cited concerns over the mode and low ridership. So that gets us to our infamous downtown interchange. So we did have 4 options. We combined, we looked at the no build, which is always an alternative, and we had that as something to test with the community and give public comment at some of our hearings. I thought it might score higher than it did. So then we had adding the express lanes flyover, which was alternatives C and D, and then we had full rebuild with express lanes, which was alternatives A and B. But luckily, we were asked at the last, near the completion of the design of the survey, to also consider the safety traffic quick fix, which was the operational and safety alternative you saw the video of earlier. So this is a lot going on here, so I'll walk you through it. So I was extremely pleased that we had, because it was surveys, many times you lose people the farther they go into the survey. They don't realize there's another screen. They don't complete the same number. But we oddly, all 4 of these had 3,800 responses, so we have very good apples to apples when we compare how the public responded. Then if you look at the star rating, because they were all asked to give it a 1 star for low support, a 5 star for high support. Then if you look at the star rating, they range from 2 to 3.2, which is not terribly different. So we don't have a big ding, ding, ding winner there either. So you have to dive down and look like, what do these bar charts mean? So on the no build, you have for the low rating, the high dark blue bar there is 4 times greater than the 5-star rating, which is the light blue bar there. So you're like, oh, okay, so that one did not win, even though its star rating was still pretty good. So let's compare. So that kind of like goes, oh, they want to do something with the interchange. No build's not really the winner here. So let's look at the 3 that are left to look at. So then I put a line there with the 500 response thing, because they're all kind of like in the middle of the road, except when you look at full rebuild with express lanes. And there we have the low star rating, almost equal with the high star rating. So it's a love-hate relationship with the full rebuild. Some supporters and some haters. Okay, so then I'm like, okay, let's look and digest what we've got left here. Well, the express fly lanes kind of in the middle of the road, but safety quick fix, a little higher in the higher star ratings. So let's look at where these ratings are coming from, because we also have this all geographically mapped. So I will show you the blow up of each of these, but if you kind of squint and look at them for the whole all at once, you see no build darker blues, a little lighter in near the interchange for the colors. So, but we already looked at that the community wants to do something with the interchange. So then when you look at the balance of them, the express lanes score is lighter blue, but still have darker concentrations in and around the downtown. The support for it, which has a little greater intensity in the yellow areas, is more in the South County and perimeters of our community. The full rebuild score, darker blue, down where the communities that are being most impacted. So you're like, those that are being impacted, not caring for this interchange as much. And there's this more gradation of support throughout the county. And then you look at the safety traffic quick fix, and it's more monotone, and you see broader support throughout the community. And this is the only one that you see the support closest to the interchange. So here we have the zoom in. So this is the no build, and it has the darker concentrations of blue. This is the safety traffic quick fix, which we now know the cat's out of the bag is the preferred local alternative. So you can see there's like actually yellow in the downtown area and throughout, and the blues are very light, and they're in the corners of our community. Here's the express lane score zoomed in, and here's the full rebuild score zoomed in. Okay, so like I said, we like to look at how we've been doing. We had a shorter time frame with less opportunities. We did not have the trim mail-out notice, the home show, or the back-to-school bashes, so we had less big events to capture folks. But because we did that new intensive social media campaign that was so effective, we actually got more responses. Got the same amount of emails and half the number of evening events, I'm pleased to say, and we improved our communities of concern response. But this is not over. We got the feedback. We developed the draft plan. You'll see the draft plan. If you open up the public period on that, on whatever format it's in, on Friday, it'll be posted online. And then that opens the 30-day window for people to comment on exactly the specifics of the plan. And my name and number will be on all the advertisements. We'll be collecting that and providing that to you at your November 5th public hearing, where you'll consider adoption. That concludes It's Time, Hillsborough.
Any questions? Any questions? Thank you, ma'am.
Well done, thank you.
2840 plan, major investment and board priorities.
Get these colds.
Great. Thank you for your patience. Good morning. My name is Todd Brower, and I've had the pleasure of working with your staff in developing this draft plan. Now, again, the emphasis is on draft plan. So it's been quite a journey. Over the last 2 years, your staff has been engaged with the public, but also your planning partners, those that own and operate this multimodal system that you all have here. Let me get the bus moving, if it will. There we go. And all of that has looked at everything from what your needs are, looking at funding, understanding what your community's impressions are of the needs and the projects that can fulfill those needs. All of that has been done over the last 2 years, and we've taken all that information. So everything that you've just heard Lisa talk about with public involvement, as well as our outreach that we've had to you, where we've interviewed you individually, as well as the poll that you've all taken, we've taken all that into account to develop this draft plan. Now, we are dealing with the future. So even though we've done our best to try to predict what we think will happen and evaluate it, there are still unknowns that we are aware of as we're looking at this draft plan. There are multiple things that will happen after this plan would be adopted after November 5th. Primarily, you'd still be looking at where the fixed route would look like from the Heart Board relative to transit, as well as other roadway improvements from the surtax. And there's also other ongoing plans, which you've just heard about today, that will not be finished by the November 5th deadline. So we've tried to take all that into account and make this a very flexible plan, compartmentalize it, so that way it could easily adapt to new information. So the MPO's role in all of this, the plan in its simplest form is really a statement as to what are you going to build, what are the services you're going to provide, and when are you going to do it by. Now, all of this, though, fits within a federal regulation that requires us to look at cost feasibility. And essentially what they're saying is you have a budget. So you've got $32.2 billion to work with. That's with the surtax, administrated through your planning partners, FDOT, the county, HART, the city, and then yourselves as well, with the MPO acting as a facilitator to bring all of this visioning together to make sure that the goals and objectives that you've set forth in the LRTP are met. So it's looking at funding programs as well as projects that's going to have a better future mobility for our residents. So to get there, we first have to start with what is that revenue? So what is the budget that we're looking at? But then the tricky part of it comes into that budget that they give us has restrictions. It has requirements on the use of those revenue dollars. So we have to look at every option and every permutation as to what those dollars can be used for and how do they fit with what we've heard from the public, but also from the direction that you've given us. We take that and then allocate that to 4 planning programs, investment programs, as well as then look at some major investments that can help economic development. And all of those are multimodal in nature. So there's not one of those, the 4 programs, as well as the projects themselves are multimodal. So the funding that becomes available, if we look at without the surtax, you're looking at a large portion of it that's going towards the strategic intermodal system as well as the state highway system. But things flip with the surtax, that those eligibility requirements that we talk about that again are mandated by federal and state law change. There's a different mandate for the surtax. You're now given a lot more opportunity to invest in transit and local roads as well. So we've taken that allocation, we've looked at those dollars, and then we've put them across 4 programming investments. So we're looking at state of good repair, Vision Zero, smart cities, real choices when not driving, and then we have a bucket for major investments. So those are those big projects that we'll be looking at. So we looked at each one of those, made sure that we were clear with what the requirements were for those dollars, took what we heard from the public as well as from you all in our individual meetings that we had with each one of you and your poll to say these are the priorities you're looking at. So your number 1 priority was the state of good repair and resiliency. So we wanted to make sure that we were filling that bucket first with all the available funds for that. Moving then on to major investments and then on to real choices. Again, I'll remind you, each one of these programs are multimodal in nature. Even the major investments include transit as an option. So we're always looking at a comprehensive approach to make sure that we're satisfying the mobility needs of our communities. So what's in those? And because I like to always tout that it is multimodal. It includes everything from maintaining the system that you currently have, and that includes transit as well as your roadways, but also includes the deployment of technology to make those systems that you already have even better, to operate even more efficiently. But it also includes other transit opportunities. We're looking at better intersections. We're looking at pedestrian movements. We're looking at all of the things that are going to improve mobility for all of our citizens across the board. So each one of those programs really looks at it in a comprehensive approach and again meets the requirements that the feds and state legislation has given us as to what those monies can be used for. So that brings us to the major investments for economic growth. And as Lisa had mentioned, we went out with that outreach to understand better what those projects would look like, what the interests are of those. But we also polled you to get a sense of what would you like to see. And there were 2 major issues that came up over and over again. We wanted to make sure from your direction that we were always aware that we're looking to not have adverse impacts on disadvantaged communities, because that's something that you all have provided in that poll over and over again, as well as access to jobs. So as we look at each one of those projects moving forward and as plans progress, we'll continue to keep an eye for those issues as well as the other issues that you brought up, including the cost of transportation to users, job clusters, and making sure that we're reducing delay, but also maximizing ridership of any major project that we have. So at this point, that's who I'm going to bring up. I'm tag teaming with Sarah. She's going to go through all the major projects for you. As I've gone through the programming and the funding of it, she's going to talk about specifically the projects. Sarah?
Thank you. All right, so over the past couple months, we've done some technical analyses to go along with looking at which projects we should include with this major investment category. First of all, as we heard from the It's Time survey, looking at fixed guideway was sort of a top priority that came out of that survey. So we looked at the reuse of the freight tracks, reusing all the CSX lines throughout the county, as well as downtown to the airport, looking at some rapid transit on a corridor between there, as well as the extension of the streetcar and also the water transit ferry. Through our initial ridership forecast, through our transit analysis, we saw that downtown to USF and downtown to the airport do continue to be sort of the strongest corridors as far as ridership potential, with also some strong to moderate on some of the additional spanning out CSX lines. And then as well as the water transit between McDill and South Shore, as well as downtown and St. Pete. As for the major economic projects on roadways, we first initially look at the strategic intermodal system. This is sort of FDOT's major roadway network to look at moving people and goods. Of that, what we heard also through its time is looking at new express lanes on I-4 and I-75, as well as the West Shore interchange is also a major project to consider. We also have included the expansion or widening of the Selman, both east and west of downtown. There's the CSX grade separation project near the port. We've seen that in some presentations as well as a TIP amendment earlier this year, trying to continue to move that project forward. As well as the downtown interchange. I think we've gone over that quite a bit this morning. There's also the addition of projects north of downtown on I-275. There is a project in the Transportation Improvement Program for fiscal year '23 that looks at between McDill and Hillsborough. That was discussed in the last TIP public hearing. And then we also have our MPO study that's going to be coming up early next year, looking at what other I guess, enhancements or what should be looked at for that corridor north of downtown. Our next set of projects that we look at are what we call our other major investments. This is looking at additional roadways. There's an additional sort of allocation of funds for non-strategic intermodal system roadways that can be applied to FDOT roads. So we've looked at, through our congestion analysis, considering which roadways have the best delay reduction. And the way that we calculated the delay reduction is we looked at what would occur if we were to implement no other projects other than what is funded for construction today versus if we were to implement these projects. So it's sort of looking at worst case scenario and then what would the delay reduction be on a project by project basis through the implementation of those improvements. The sort of top ones of the state roads off the SIS system that came out were US 301 just east of Palm River, sort of alleviating the I-4, I-75 interchange, as well as US 41 in South County. We also have portions of US 92 west and east of Plant City for consideration, as well as Mango Road, again, alleviating that I-4, I-75 area. And then Causeway Boulevard, just heading west to the port, sort of alleviating that as well. And then also a right sizing of Fowler, sort of between 275 and Bruce B. Downs, looking at sort of enhancing the safety of that roadway. As far as county roads, we work closely with county staff to identify which roads should be included in the congestion analysis. And those dash lines that you see up there are some of the top performing. We are continuing to work with the county. As Todd mentioned, there is flexibility that we are building into this plan. We know that our adoption date is sort of ahead of where the county is in identifying major investments. They also have a study looking at Lithia Pinecrest right now. We've been coordinating with them on that, looking at whether or not there's additional operation improvements that can be done instead, as well as they have their new Big Bend and Sims Road area, or not Big Bend, sorry, Gibsonton Road and Sims Road area study that's kicking off soon that'll look at identifying whether or not there are operational improvements instead of widenings that can be done in those areas as well. So we're continuing to work with the county. We did identify these based on congestion relief, and then we also flagged them for wildlife corridors and proximity to disadvantaged communities and other examples. And as you can see from the It's Time survey, there was a lot of support for looking at relieving that I-4, I-75 interchange as well. This sort of recaps the performance-based program outcomes that we expect through our analysis for those 4 projects that Todd went through. The State of Good Repair and Resiliency, this is really that program that gets us out of the backlog, as well as protecting our roadway networks in case of a major storm event. So reducing the backlog of resurfacing, getting our bridge maintenance into a manageable time frame, as well as making sure that we're able to support the existing transit service and cutting down some of those bus calls when needed. Our Vision Zero is, again, that safety project, looking at 500 miles of lights on unlit streets right now, 1,400 miles of filling in sidewalk gaps, 350 miles of complete streets, and reducing crashes by 35%. As far as our smart cities goes, this is where we use the technology to sort of help relieve congestion. We're looking at 220 miles of network improvements, as well as a reduce in delay by 40% and improve travel time by 30%. Our final program-based program is the Real Choices When Not Driving. This is our transit expansion and our trails. We're looking at going from 300 miles of bus service today to 800 miles of good and frequent service. This will provide an additional this will allow an additional 34% of currently isolated populations to have access to regular bus service, as well as 150 miles of trails. This will nearly build out the entire proposed trails network as it is today. So after we adopt this plan, we know that HART and their board have been beginning discussions of sort of the first step is CSX. There was that presentation about a month back, as well as what are the next steps moving forward with what does fixed guideway mean to them, as well as continuing to work with our jurisdictional partners and the Expressway Authority on determining which roads should be included. If there's a need to come back later, we can. As well as continuing as MPO staff to assist our jurisdictions in monitoring the performance-based outcomes for each of those programs. So if you have any questions at this time, please let me know. Thank you.
Any questions? Mr. Green, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sarah, why aren't the multimodal transit facilities factored into this, or are they?
Yes, they're considered, because they are larger costing projects, we're considering them to be major investments. So any of those fixed guideways, bus rapid transit in its own right-of-way, those kinds of projects would be considered major projects. We also, when we looked at the fixed guideway, we made sure that we modeled it with a robust underlying local network and express bus system. That way that we're representing the growth of what we're including in our Real Choices bucket, along with what would be the fixed guideway projects.
I just have a concern in that they're not showing up on the maps yet.
We do have it in the one map, sorry. This is sort of the initial fixed guideway. We do have an underlying network that we do lay underneath this. So this is looking at the CSX corridor freight reuse, as well as the possible extension of the streetcar and also the water transit.
No, but I mean the multimodal transit facilities that are part of this network. The locations for those, are they?
What do you mean by multimodal facility?
Well, the assumption is that we're going to have one in West Shore, downtown, and up at USF.
Oh, were you talking about the intermodal centers?
Yes.
Oh, okay. So yes, you're correct. Those are not shown on this map. We can look at considering to add those. There are still some questions about specific locations outside of the West Shore to be able to add at this time. So we could probably or possibly add a vague bubble for those as well. Sorry.
Okay. All right.
Mr. Wagner, recognize.
Yeah, back on the slide where you talked about the different goals, you had smart cities, and you list a 40% reduction in delay and a 30%, what is that, improvement
travel
in
time
reliability. Is that against today's delay times and reliabilities, or is that against, what it could be if you did nothing in 2045 and the improvement that would make? Because it's really critical to know what the performance criteria are. We adopted some trip time and reliability measures last year. So are those going to be improved by 40% and 30%? Or is that going to go down, but it's still 40% better than what it would have been if you didn't make it?
This is if you were to fund the specific projects allotted to this program. Looking at different applications of intersection improvements, interchange improvements, ITS, those sorts of things, route mannering.
Okay.
Then we can-
I'm going to ask a different question. 'cause I
Joe,
don't
it's
think
the
I'm-
latter. This is an improvement over what it would otherwise be in the year 2045.
Critical is we need to know those don't tell you the story. What tells you the story is what's your travel time today, what's it going to be 15 years from now with the program, and what your trip reliability time is going to be 15 years from now with a plus 50% increase in population. That 50% increase in population is going to bring a direct correlation in terms of trip demand to the community. We need transit. We need more transit choices. If we could triple our transit ridership, I think that would be a great goal. If you triple your transit ridership, you're going to handle less than 10% of the growth that's coming at us. You still have 90% of the trip demand with a 50% increase in population that still needs to be addressed. So those kind of numbers, when I'm trying to absorb that, it's like, wow, if we don't do anything, it's going to be really horrible. And the only way I know how much worse it's going to be is if I see, well, what is my real raw number today and what's it going to be tomorrow? The percentages in this case are not giving you a clear picture of what's coming our way. So I think we have to, it's transportation, it's not transit, it's not highways, it's transportation. We need to have a comprehensive look. I am concerned, it's not just because I run an expressway, I am concerned that when we are talking about taking away vehicular capacity or lanes, that we have to be very sensitive about that because the demand on those lanes is going to go up very dramatically. If you can get a banker's holiday today where schools are off and nobody's going to work and it's an easy day travel, when you get 5-10 years from now, there will be no banker's holidays because the off day is going to look like today in terms of trip demand. And in 40 years, it's going to look twice as bad as today with the trip demand we see coming at us. So we need to have real numbers that we can see and measure by. A 40% worse than it would be if you did nothing is not telling this group what's coming their way. Thank you.
We can clarify that.
Any other questions or comments?
Yeah.
I have a question.
I'm sorry, Mayor.
So, in this plan, this is not where we have the projects ranked then, correct? 1, 2, 3, all the way through?
They are ranked in the table in the document. So there is a ranking of county-owned roadways
Right.
based on congestion reduction and the size of the job cluster that they serve.
So the rankings are there, okay. So I have, if I don't mind, I would like to ask our district secretary a couple of questions, if you don't mind, about that.
Secretary?
I guess in this plan, when I look at it, does this plan allow you to be able to maximize FDOT's opportunities to be able to get federal funding? Is there anything in this plan that slows down the process, hampers the process, or eliminates the opportunity to get federal funding? Because if I look at this plan, the majority of the dollars is going to become, or either going to be the county's dollars, the state dollars, and then obviously the lion's share is the federal dollars, okay? So in this plan here, again, is it helping you or is it slowing down the process?
And I'm going to ask Ed to help me because he may know some more of the nuances on this. But you want to,
Sure. So Ed McKinney with the Florida Department of Transportation. So it's a good question, Mayor. And in my opinion, this plan does prohibit and restricts the department from moving forward with some of our strategic intermodal system projects. Mainly, the way this plan is presented, it does restrict us moving forward with segment 7, which is downtown. I'll start with that, downtown to Bears. It addresses operational improvements to MLK, which is not the full length of the project. The project that was, as we've studied it, actually went up to Bears. This plan then takes the remaining portion and actually skips over MLK to Hillsborough and then goes from Hillsborough to Bears. and ties them to a study that has yet to be determined, which is the Boulevard study. So that, yes, it restricts us. Currently in the plan, currently in the TIP, we have, I can't see that without my glasses. In 23, we have $40 million that's programmed for that portion of interstate. If we move forward with this, with the long-range plan as it's shown, we put ourselves in jeopardy of losing that money, because what this plan says is you can't do it, the department can't do anything until after a boulevard study is completed. We don't believe that's appropriate, and we don't believe that's what we've been working on over the last 20-something years that we've been talking about interstate improvements. It doesn't address the improvements needed, such as we need more parallel facilities, such as State Road 60 widening, which is a strategic intermodal center, a strategic intermodal system project, as is 92. So we have some concerns about the plan and our ability to move forward as Joe Wagner had presented. You know, we've got congestion coming at us in huge numbers. These aren't small numbers. I mean, it's if you really understood the magnitude of of what's coming at us by 2045, we're going to be the size of Miami. And if you think about Miami, if you took Miami out of its existing place and you dumped it on Tampa with all its congestion and all its problems, and what Miami has going for it is they do have that robust transit system. They do have express bus. They do have light rail. They have heavy rail. They have all of those things. We don't have those things, but yet we're going to have that demand. So how do we handle that demand on the existing system? And my concern with this plan as it's presented is that this doesn't get us there. This doesn't get us that, folks that are coming from Pasco County and to Hillsborough County to go to work every day. It doesn't address that. It doesn't provide for an opportunity for us to introduce some bus rapid transit opportunities, because and what it does is, if you do that, it's going to put a huge cost on that rapid transit system, because they're going to have to build their own infrastructure. As part of Segment 7, that infrastructure was built in the cost of that project, so the interstate road construction would handle that. So we have some serious concerns about this plan, and we'll provide comments to the board so that they could address those and see those, but we are concerned.
You have recommendations to it because obviously as a board here, we want to maximize every dollar that's given to us. And obviously time, to me, is our biggest enemy we have right now, okay? So any plan that we have that's going to slow down, right, rail, roads, any process, to me, it gives us less opportunity to be able to hit the 2045 goals that we're trying to assess. So, I guess my question here is how can we, try to take FDOT and see if possibly we can make changes in this plan so that we, speed the process up and get additional federal dollars.
If I could just real quickly on what Ed said, and he brought up Segment 7, which has been in the long-range plan for a long time, and which was voted upon in June. One of the things that we've tried really hard to do is to look for opportunities to increase capacity without acquiring extensive right-of-way. In other words, maximizing the right-of-way we already own. The segment of I-275 north of I-4 was originally shown as express lanes, and working with the community, we agreed to remove the express lanes from the plan. But in its place, we're going to be general purpose lanes. There's no additional right-of-way that's required in order to do that. Nothing at all. And one argument I hear, and I understand people want to talk about induced demand. I'm not arguing that putting an additional general purpose lane is going to solve the congestion woes. It's not. But I can also say that not adding those two lanes is not going to stop the development that's planned to come to this area. And we're going to have to deal with that traffic. We are a regional agency. We don't look just at what you look at. You look at Hillsborough County. We look at the region, and the region is growing. And when we have to look at the needs on I-275 north of I-4, we need to, in the future, to add those lanes. We're just going to need to do that. Now, is that going to solve? Are we going to say you're going to go from 20 miles an hour and all of a sudden in peak hour you're going 50 miles an hour? No. What we're saying, you're probably still going to have peak hours, but those peak hours are going to be shorter. They won't last as long, and you're going to move more people. And if you don't move more people on that corridor, where are they going to go? They're going to go on Florida, they're going to go on other parallel facilities where you really don't want those trips to be taking place. So as Ed said, our concern is mostly about, as we interpret this, what this does is it precludes us from moving forward with anything within segment 7 to include taking it up to Hillsborough Avenue. And so we want to work with staff in order to try to make sure that's not the intent of the plan.
I have one more question. So in reality, because I've been here 16 years now, and I always like to say that, when I've been looking at maps with 92 and 574 and 60 and other roads on there, but after 16 years, they haven't, I don't feel like we're any closer to having them accomplished than we are today, okay? So if we take the current plan, and let's just take 92 for an example, okay? Under this current plan, when would 92 be 4-lane? When would you guess?
Without it being moved further up into the priority list, it'd be a long time because the federal money ranked by priority projects, when you look at the priority list, those projects are pretty far down, and there's a good chance we may not get to them for a very long time.
But we're talking about a plan for 2045.
Yep.
And
Hold on. You done, Mr. Merlot?
I'll rest for a minute, yes.
Mr. Walden, were you going to say something?
Yes, thank you. I just need to clarify a point of fact, and that is that the portion of Section 7 that is between MLK and Hillsborough that was voted on by this board last summer at the public hearing, that is included in the plan as a design-build phase for construction in fiscal '23. It is in the table for the projects that are funded in the first 5 years. We have a separate table for that. We have a separate table because those are decisions that have already been made. So what we are asking you to look at is the projects for which you have not made decisions yet. So far, you have asked your staff to look at different alternatives for Section 7. And so that's what we've identified as a note in the plan, that we'll be doing this study. After the study is done, we'll come back, remove that note, describe what are the improvements that come out of that study. The funding, the segment, the identification of all of that, that's all in the plan, it's in the table, it's on the maps. If you'd like us to change the description, we can change the description. We've done our best to reflect the decisions that you've made so far.
I would suggest just as a CIS facility, most of the time we plan the CIS facilities, we work with the MPOs, and we've always had this in the plan. What I would suggest is, I understand there's a study that's going to be done. We don't know what the results of that study are going to be. If that study comes out with something that you want to change, what's been in the plan for 20 years, then at that point would be the appropriate time to make that change. But at this point, just take it out and say we're going to hold it hostage until a study that we don't even know when it may be determined, I don't think that's going to allow us to do certain things that we'd like to do for future planning. So we're competing. We're competing as a region. If it's not in your plan, it's not very easy for us to compete.
There are a lot of projects that I think this board agrees on with you that we can work together on. We do update this plan every 5 years. There are a lot of unknowns, as you've mentioned, in this corridor north of downtown Tampa. You mentioned the BRT study that T-BARTA is doing. HART is also looking at transit improvements. There's a Heights mobility study. There are a lot of questions about what happens in this corridor. And I think it would be helpful to this board to have a little bit more time to sort through what is the right approach.
And you will have that time because you would have to add it into your tip.
Right.
It's not like we're going to force it down your throat. But to change the plan, a lot of the planning documents, when we work with Federal Highway, when we work with our folks to get approvals for setting things up for the future, you're basically saying, let's put this thing on delay, and instead of, if it is decided we needed to add these lanes within our existing right-of-way in the future, you're going to delay it out that many years, and we're just going to be kind of waiting until you put it back in.
Decide what you like.
Somewhere, somehow, we got to work together and quit all this bickering. I think it needs to start right now.
Mm-hmm.
Commissioner Overman, you recognize. Mr. Overman,
What
recognized.
percentage, thank you. What percentage of this, or how dependent are these projects of our matching dollars for funding in terms of how they're being prioritized in the list? I think there's, these tend to correlate much with the surtax kind of categories. We were looking at how we were building these projects and looking at the planning associated with how we're growing. But I'm curious if given the way we have funding hopefully coming down the road, how much of this plan reflects the fact that we would have matching dollars to participate in this priority list?
You mean for tax money? Not, really, I don't think you're spending the tax money on our
any of
roads.
these.
I mean, I'm not talking about the LRTP, I'm talking about our projects.
Yeah.
Now, for instance, US 92 is a good example, because it's not CIS, but we need to get federal MPO money in order to make those improvements.
Right.
If they're at the bottom of the priority list, we're not going to come in and say, no, you're not going to fund 1, 3, 5, and 8. We're going to go to number 24. We'll work with you on the priority list. But I think to the mayor's point is that most of the highway capacity projects in the county are at the very low end of the priorities. The CIS money, which we control, is the money that we're using for most of these major projects, like the interstate projects. That's all CIS money.
Okay.
It's strategic intermodal system money, and we don't get that based on our population of the state. We get that based on competing with other regions for that money.
Right.
And so that's why we're saying if you take it out of it and our folks think we don't necessarily have planning consistency, that's an easy way to say, okay, you guys are pushed off to the side for a while. Now let's see what Miami wants or what Orlando wants or Jacksonville wants. We're not saying that we're going to come in here one day and surprise you and say, hey, we got all the money to build 4 lanes, additional lane each direction. What we're saying is at that point we would bring it to you and we would be able to have a discussion. But I would hate to see us just say we're waiting on a study that we have no idea what it's going to say. And we're going to basically say, well, we're not confident anymore over here. We want to wait until this study gets done.
Well, we do that all the time. We're always waiting for a study.
Unfortunately, that's why we don't get our fair share a lot of the time, to be honest.
I mean, we're honestly always waiting for a study. But I do think that there is some consensus over, some of this list. I do feel your pain as far as expansion, especially in the East County area where we have a very, South and East County, a very lacking network of roadways in that particular area. And it's not necessarily because of the lack of transportation, it's a lack of space because of the way our land code has developed and allowed no connectivity in that area. So it is going to be a challenge. I know the county is addressing some of its, hopefully soon, some of our land code issues that would actually make it easier for us to be robust in our transit planning to be able to address some of those challenges. And that would change our priority list. It would actually end up changing it down the road. I don't think this is this, as you've said, this is not going to be a list that we're going to live with for the next 45 years. It's going to be a list that we're dealing with for the next 5 years. And I think we can probably put together a decent list of specific projects that if we need to move them up or down the list because of the way things are playing out in our growth patterns, we can do that in the future. I don't think we have to, we don't have to wait 5 years. We can add those, we make those changes. But to your point, having that conversation is important, but we also have to recognize where the dollars are and how our growth pattern is going to address that particular issue, especially when it comes to where we put houses, and where the jobs are. So, but I understand your question. Sorry.
Mr. Wagner, you recognize.
Secretary Gwynn pretty much highlighted what I was going to make a point of, is that we are in competition for those state dollars and those federal dollars that accompany the state match to those dollars. DOT does their own 10, 20, and 30-year financial plans, and they do it on a first in, first out. If one region has identified projects 5 and 10 years out that are critical to them, and they put it on their priority list, and we don't have candidates in, then when we do put one in, we're still going to be second on the list, even if we're in that same time frame. So that's what we are hurting ourselves with, penalizing ourselves with, if we don't identify and provide the support he needs to go to Tallahassee to get us a higher priority in getting those funds.
Mr. Kemp, be recognized.
Thank you. I think it's an important discussion that I still don't think we've really had, honestly. And we've been all over the place, but, the BRT regional, that I call the regional parking garage plan, because the intermodal systems, the intermodal centers are really just parking garages that most of that's being spent on. It's not a good priority for me, even though I'm a huge transit supporter. The segment, as I expressed many times north of I-275, north of downtown, is not a priority in terms of what we need to be doing. Widening that, it's going to have severe impacts in the future on all the areas that it goes through. We've never seen the travel numbers for the intersections. I've gotten them myself. 60% of the people that use that expressway now travel locally between Fowler and downtown. Their local travel in and out of that area. North of Fowler and Fletcher Avenue up, that is an undercapacity roadway for many, many, many years to come. A lot of the travel that comes from Pasco comes down to USF through many, many ways, or through Veterans, through 75, through all kinds of other things. So I, agree about this being a lower priority. I'm just not understanding. I just want to say I want to look at this much more carefully. I'm not ready to make that jump or look at that. I don't think that that's the wisest way to have our money spent or to compete in the state, honestly. I had a long time on the bridge last night with my driver, and he happened to tell me that he lived in Riverview, and he said, to his knowledge, the worst traffic in all of the Hillsborough County. He just volunteered this. I never even asked him. He said, is Big Bend Road and I-75. You got it, there has to be something. I didn't tell him who I was or anything. Something done about that. And he said he was worked at McDill for his full-time job, and that he had heard about a ferry. I had asked him, did you hear about the ferry? And he was very excited about that, So I think that there's some more discussion to be had in this. I've never felt like we had the information we needed to make good decisions about it. So I'm not concerned about that. I really want to be looking at this carefully. It's the future. And I'm not sure, honestly, too, that we have support in Washington for these projects, which is where we're looking for federal money. So I think we should know that we do have that support if we want to push these things forward, because I'm not sure it's there.
I would say the money that we're talking about, federal money, is not federal earmark money. It's not federal appropriations money. This is money given to the state that we prioritize it. So it's the state assigns that money, not the federal government. It's provided to us because we pay so much in the gas taxes, and we get that money back to redistribute.
Pass-through. Pass-through money.
There is a lot of, I tell you what, years ago, they took away any state involvement in land use planning. So, but I'll tell you what, when you look at the projections and you talk about that segment north of Bears, when you look at the projections for growth in Pasco County and even up into Hernando County, that's going to be over capacity. And so, again, what you essentially would be doing with this is taking it out of the long-range transportation, because it's in the current plan, and it has been. And we've been working all these years, spending money on studies and getting it lined up so that someday we'll be able to get that project built. And this will be a major step backwards. And maybe that's, for some people, what they'd like to see. But I'd say from a regional mobility standpoint, that is an extremely critical connection. It's one that we need to plan in the future to have something. Or one of the guys before had mentioned that you got a 2% increase or whatever decrease in how that impacts. Consider a 50% increase in traffic. Now, delay, when you talk about traffic volumes, say traffic volumes are growing linearly, when you get to a certain point, and we're about there, if not already there, it becomes not linear, it becomes exponential. And 10% increase in traffic might give you a 40% increase in delay. that traffic's going to go somewhere. It's like water. You're going to squeeze it in, and it's going to come down all your other roads, and before you know it, a lot of the problems that we have in our arterials are going to get worse. So I'm just saying I'd hate to see that project, after all these years of planning, end up being taken out of the LRTP when we really don't need to. If you want to do that later, when you have something else to replace it, do it then.
Stewart, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Secretary Gwynn, for stepping in with your comments, and thank you to Mayor Lott for bringing this up. I understand the concerns around Section 7, I really do, but as a member who represents a lot of that area, and if you haven't been up to that area, you need to travel up to that area, I am concerned that we would push off money and put ourselves in line second, third, fourth, wherever we would land, just so that we can feel comfortable with what we want to do up there. If we don't have the money, we're not going to be able to do it. The bottom line is, if we do not get prioritized by the state and with the federal money, we're not going to be able to do anything. We'll be waiting even longer to finish what we need to do. So my question for you is, what do you need from us to make sure that we stay at the top of the priority list for the funding that needs to happen for this community and for the region? Because it's not just the community. It's not just Hillsborough County. We have to talk about this regionally. What do you need from us?
We would
that
prefer
this
that,
happens?
just like the current LRTP, we have Segment 7 improvements included and not tied to an arbitrary study in the future, some results that we don't know what they might be, and more or less not put it on pause until we figure out. You always are going to have the opportunity at some point in the future, if you do a study and you say, that's our current goal, you can change it then. But it's like, why, if you were standing in line to pay your bill and you're not sure if you're going to buy something else, are you going to get out of the line and say, oh, let me wait over here until I figure it out? You're going to stay in line, and then maybe at the last minute, maybe you go and run and get the thing. It's sort of like, we don't want to get ourselves out of the line and have to go all the way to the back. There's been a lot of time and money over the years, many years, put in on Segment 7. And I'm telling you, we're trying so hard to stay within our right-of-way. And we got to use our right-of-way to the maximum potential that we can, so we don't have to buy additional right-of-way. If we have to widen one of the arterials along that segment, we're going to have to buy right-of-way. We don't have any of those roads that have right-of-way that we can add lanes and increase capacity. And induced demand, I get it, it might still be congested, but you know what? You're going to push 25% more traffic through by adding another 33%, I guess, if you go from 3 to 4. You'll maybe go in the same speeds, but you're going to move 33% more people, even if it's at the same speed. Those are the kind of things we may have to live with, even if we have great transit. If we get to 10% ridership on transit, that's robust. I hope we can get there. And I also want to remind you, FDOT is putting a lot of money into transit. We've also committed, if you get a project that's eligible for federal funds, we will participate to match the local funds. So it's not like we're going to try to hurt transit. We're trying to find ways to help in all the modes.
Mayor Lott, you recognize.
Final comment. So in this plan today, we recognize that these capacity roads are important to us because they were on the plan. Staff did a great job showing them, saying these projects are important for us to be able to accomplish by 2045, okay? If we're not trying to accomplish these projects by 2045, then why are they up there, right? Okay, so we're all sitting here looking at approving a plan that we anticipate we're going to have all these capacity roads completed by 2045. But the problem is that if our capacity projects are ranked 16th, 18th, 23rd, 24th, 25, they'll never get funded, So I really think we need to have a conversation about those projects that were already up in this 2045 plan, and let's have a conversation with FDOT and say, where do these projects need to be? And if the number one capacity project is 574, I'm just throwing a name out there, okay, then so be it. Let's discuss it, vote on it, and let's move it up to a ranking. If the next one's 92 or whatever the projects they are. But I think we have to get, if we truly say we want to build these roads in this plan that we say we want to build, we've got to get serious and prioritize these roads where FDOT can get the federal funding to building. They've been up there since 2003, since I've been here. For same roads, same thing. We say by 2030 we're going to build them. 2035 we're going to build them. 2040, now it's 2045, okay? And there's still lines up on a map, So I believe that we need to work closer with FDOT in trying to figure out how to get the federal funding to get these capacity roads a reality. And I'll close with that. Thank you very much.
Are there any other comments? Okay, we need to open this up for public comment. But I think this board needs to do something today to get to where we need to be, Mayor. So I'm open up for public comment. Anyone wishing to speak on this issue? Anyone wishing to speak on this issue, please come forward. You have 3 minutes each.
Don Weaver, 401 East Jackson Street. I admire the way you want to make sure that we study what we do north of downtown on I-275, sensitive to the neighbors, as we have been for 2.5 years. But I do not believe that we need to take that caution and that newfound 2.5 years of compromise that has been eloquently, thoughtfully, and aggressively achieved an hour ago on a quick fix that is only a quick fix, to try to get on with the West Shore interchange being coupled with the downtown interchange, holding them both up for 2.5 years. And now I can't imagine that we would hold up the next leg in order to create another 2.5 year or 25-year delay of us getting on with our future. I think we need to take the concerns of the neighborhoods north of downtown and continue to give them our complete attention, but not to the distraction of the rest of the region's mobility, of putting not only our monies in place before other jurisdictions take them from us, but also making sure that as a public body, we give consideration to our future by funding and by planning that includes the necessary next links. And then, as has been mentioned by the DOT, if in a year or two something better can be found that needs adjustment, so be it. We've adjusted A, B, C, D, and E to option E today with this compromise and the quick fix and this interchange. If that's necessary in the north, so be it. But don't take away the crucial links north of downtown in those interchanges and keep us away from the money that we, for the last 2.5 years, have already made a lot of people very happy in Orlando and Jacksonville and Miami with the money for our future and our mobility and our children's mobility. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Mr. Davidson, 3 minutes, sir.
I won't need 3 minutes. I appreciate the discussion that you're having today from the mayor and Mr. Wagner. It's an important discussion. It should have taken place several years ago. But the bottom line is, if you have an illness, and this county has an illness, it has a transportation illness, why in heavens would you not want to take the therapy you have available instead of waiting for some hope of a cure in the future? It doesn't make any sense. You can always go for what you were talking about tearing down, but not to accept a therapy that is available, and that if you deny it now, you can't have it later, doesn't make any sense. So I would urge you to listen to the kind gentleman and to those people here. And I appreciate the discussion you had today. It's one of the best ones I've ever attended. Thank you.
Anyone else? Anyone else? 3 minutes.
I also echo Jim Davison's comments, and I do appreciate the discussion, and I do appreciate Mr. Gwen and FDOT's efforts and what they've done to mitigate impacts to the neighborhoods on that segment north of downtown. That the interstate is a regional asset. It is used by multiple counties. I live in Pinellas County. That is one of my major evacuation routes. If I ever had to use it, I have had to use it. The other thing is I am kind of surprised that anyone would say about having more conversations. We've had more conversations about 275 and Malfunction Junction for the last decades than we ever care to have. It's time for action. And also, I lived in Lutz for 30 years. I watched just north of me North Hillsborough and South Pasco grow like crazy. And what happened is exactly what Mr. Gwynn said. 275, that traffic went on to Florida Avenue and Nebraska and neighborhood roads, making them dangerous. So I just ask that, don't take something out of the plan. And the other comment I will make is I find it highly ironic, and this is why people get very frustrated, when this MPO is studying tearing down that portion while the state just gave T-BARTA money to study putting a BRT on it. I mean, there's something wrong here with this picture, and it needs to be fixed. Thank you.
Anyone else? Anyone else? Okay. Let me say this. I spent 14 years in Tallahassee. I chaired a subcommittee on transportation before, when the Democrats were in control, when the Republicans took over, I still stayed on transportation. I watched Orlando and Miami get the bulk of the money for those 16 years I was there. Pissed me off, excuse my French. I still watch what goes on in Tallahassee, and guess what? Jacksonville now gets part of it, Orlando still gets it, and so does Miami. And we're sitting here fighting each other about what we should be doing and how can we get dollars and how we cannot get dollars. Someone needs to do something, and I'm willing to work with whomever we can to get this thing done. This board and DOT, FDOT, and our secretary needs to work on what we need to do to make sure that when we get those dollars and he goes up there to Tallahassee, where I spent 14 years and watched all those secretaries from across the state come up there and beg for money, and the ones from Orlando area and Miami area always walked away with it. I'm sitting there going, what the hell is wrong with us? It's time to bring it home. So whatever we need to do, let's get it done. I got 13 more months on this commission and on this board, hopefully. And I walk out of here, I want to make sure that we are on the same page trying to get those things done. So what are we going to do today?
Amen.
What are we going to do? Somebody make a motion, somebody say something. Or do I need to pass the gavel and make a motion to ask our board and the secretary to sit down and work something out and bring it back to us at the next meeting? Is that what I need to do?
I think that's a grand idea.
Okay, you're the chair, Mike. I make a motion that the secretary and his staff, and our MPO and her staff, sit down together and work something out about all these issues that we may have. And if Mr. Wagner, I know he works with a expressway area, and the mayor want to get involved in that without going through the sunshine issue, Mr. Clark, that they bring something back at our next meeting, which would be October the 9th.
Oh, October the 9th?
I'm sorry, when is our next board meeting?
It's November the 5th.
November the 5th, I'm sorry. November the 5th, that this board can discuss and work cohesively with some collegiality with the secretary. That's my motion.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Miller, and we have a second by Mayor Lott, sorry, and school member Stewart.
I don't come to one meeting, they forget me.
Do we have any discussion?
I think it's an excellent idea.
And Mr. Green?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Was that motion to create a task force?
No, it wasn't to create a task force. It's just working together. Sit down, our staff sit down with his staff.
Okay.
And work it out. We create another task force, guess what?
Another 2.5 years.
That's what I was getting at. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Point of clarification?
Yes.
So at our next meeting is a public hearing to adopt the plan. In advance of that, we need to have a 30-day public comment period on the draft plan. I think it's pretty clear what needs to be changed in the draft plan to address the concerns that the secretary has raised this morning. I think we need to change the description of I-275 north of downtown Tampa so that it reflects the addition of 2 lanes, which is the recommendation out of the PD&E study that the department concluded earlier this year. I don't think that requires a lot of additional coordination. That's an easy change for us to make. If you'd like us to make this change, we'd be happy to do that.
Sit down with him and work out the changes to be made. Now, let me ask you this. Have we advertised for a public hearing in November?
Yes,
It's been advertised.
it's been advertised.
Well, I think that between now and then, you all can get together and not you make the change, work with him and try to make it. I think that's what this board is talking about.
But I think what we're talking about also is taking those capacity projects and reprioritizing them.
Excuse
so that
me,
they can
but-
get federal funding.
We're not getting recognized here, I don't think, to have, but so we've got the statement that Ms. Alden's made, and I think the next person, did you still want to speak?
I do, because I don't think Ms. Alden's comments encapsulate everything that, Secretary Gwen stated at the podium, which was about funding and making sure that our priorities are about funding and not about the projects. So I don't want, Ms. Alden's statements or comments about changes to the draft to be the only thing that are considered. I don't think that's the whole package. Secretary Gwen?
Would you like?
So I know that I agree there needs to be, and I agree with the motion, there needs to be a healthy and robust conversation, but I don't think that's the only piece. I think there's more to it.
Well, we can, and I don't, 30 days would be Monday, something like that. We can meet this week. I think the two things I had heard was talking about how segment 7 is presented and also where the capacity projects would fall within the priority list. Now, where those capacity projects fall within the priority list, I mean, me and you could come up and our staffs with something new, but I don't know if that would be, you would go straight to hearing with that, or whether that's up to the board, how that would work.
That's the motion.
All right, we'll meet this
Okay.
week.
I have a concern, and that's that I heard something about not being in sunshine, or how would that work? What are we talking about here? I think okay, I just wondered, because there was just a thing about
Sorry, board member.
sunshine.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Can I
Yeah.
clarify? I said if any member of two members of this board wanted to sit down with them, then we have to work out the sunshine. That's what I said.
So, yeah,
Okay,
in a short-term meeting, I would just recommend any member of this board can communicate with MPO staff, with District 7 staff, can communicate with them at the same time. Just that, for instance, Commissioner Miller, you mentioned Mayor Lott or Director Wagner, they just can't be in the same room at the same time communicating with those people. So they'd have to do it separately, that's all.
Because then I heard a committee meeting. I'm just trying to sort this out. I just wanted to know. I would also like to, look and see what was going on with this in terms of
I didn't say anything about a
changing.
committee meeting, Commissioner Kemp. That motion didn't say anything about a committee.
I know, but someone else did here.
I'm
but
talking about my motion, not what someone else said.
Real quick, there's one thing that might add a little clarity, and I'm sorry, I'm relying on Ed because he's the one who's dealt a lot more with going back, but what he was, maybe if he could suggest to you, tell you what things we asked to be put into the LRTP that did not get put into the LRTP, and that might fill the gap a little bit.
Yeah, so I think this is much easier than probably, if we could just take the comments that we've already provided to the MPO staff, incorporate our SIS priorities, incorporate, which includes State Road 60, and there may be some other things we also need to look at, and then also change the description of how segment 7 is presented. I think most of that has already been provided to the staff. It's just, coordinating that final conversation. I think that could be done relatively quickly.
She said.
Okay. Are there any other?
Just a quick question, just so that we know what we're dealing with when we come back to the meeting. Once that agreement is made and the document is produced, you'll circulate it to all the board members?
Yes.
Just for review and review?
Before we get here, yes.
Okay, and any comments? Okay. And that should be done within the next week? In order to meet our deadlines, as far as advertising is concerned?
I'm seeing all the heads
Yes,
shaking.
I mean, I believe Ms. Alden has our comments, but again, I mean, we haven't talked through the last, I think the last email that we sent, but we could probably do that today and knock that out pretty quickly.
My concern really was just around making sure the public has had an opportunity to review the documents once we've also looked at it as well. So that there is, at the next hearing, which is a hearing, there's an opportunity for robust feedback and that we can take into the future for future planning. That's why I wanted to make sure that that was what our timeline looked like. So thank you very much.
Ms. Scherberger.
Yeah, can we move the public hearing? Can we do it in December instead of November?
It's been advertised already.
It's also subject to a federal deadline that the long-range plan has to be updated every 5 years. So I think our deadline was like the 11th of November.
Sir, any further, Commissioner Smith?
Yes, I just want to express the hope that as our MPO chair meets with the FDOT staff, the MPO chair and director and staff, that what comes out of that is a true consensus with the two, not simply, oh, we don't like what we've seen the MPO bring, so we want the FDOT to take the reins again. I just want to express that hope that what happens here will be our MPO director representing the direction that she's gotten from the board here in those discussions.
Is there any other discussion? Okay. Seeing none, we have a motion on the floor by Commissioner Miller and seconded by, I believe, Mayor Lott and School Board Member Stewart. Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay.
Okay. Now that we've corrected that on that stuff. Executive Director's report.
Okay, very good. Thank you for the thorough discussion. No, we have a lot of difficult issues to grapple with, and it is a fine line to walk. I wanted to let you know that we have made some real progress in advancing one of the projects that you all made a priority and sent a letter about probably 6 or 9 months ago, which is that I-275 State Route 60 interchange in West Shore. That is a $1.5 billion project. We are very much in competition with the other major cities around the state. Exactly that concern that you were just talking about. And advancing this project would be very timely if it could sync up in time with the reconstruction of the Howard Franklin Bridge and not go out for 2 phases of construction. We tried hard this past year, sending a letter of support. A number of the local governments also sent letters of support, Pinellas also. We were not able to get funding for construction this past year. So over this summer, I reached out to all of our legislative delegation members and met with them individually to seek their support for the project. I drafted a resolution of support that went to our legislative delegation, and the secretary spoke to that, and the legislative delegation supported the resolution. We're now bringing that to the Bay Area Legislative Delegation on November the 19th. And we are going to be working with the other MPOs from around the region to show solidarity and support for this very important project. Another item I want to make sure is on your agendas. On October 22nd, we have a policy committee meeting. We're going to be spending a lot of that meeting focusing on the department's update of the tentative work program. So that is the response to the priorities that you adopted at your hearing last summer, and we'll look at what the department was able to advance and assign dollars to, at least in this preliminary draft. Because of the timing of the legislative session this year, this board has to send its letter of comment about the draft tentative work program by the middle of November, and our only public meeting between now and then, other than the policy committee, is going to be our hearing to adopt the long-range transportation plan. So my proposal to you is, if you would like to look at the tentative work program and look at our letter of comments, please, please, please come to the policy committee on the 22nd of October so that we can have our discussion about the draft tentative work program. So that what we'll be bringing to you at the November public hearing is a draft letter of comment that'll be on your consent agenda so that we can allow the public to have their time to provide comments on the draft long-range plan. There is a table in this agenda packet. It's under the addendum, project fact sheets and updates. It's called Hillsborough MPO Project Highlights, FDOT Draft Tentative Work Program for fiscal years 21 through 25. So I'd like to draw your attention to that. Please feel free to call me between now and the 22nd, and I hope you can make it to that meeting. In the addendum, item B, project fact sheets and updates. The first bullet point there is Hillsborough MPO Project Highlights, FDOT Draft Tentative Work Program for fiscal years 21 through 25. So that's our preliminary list of projects to be funded in this year's update of the work program. We also have our joint board workshop with the HART Board scheduled for next week. That's a week from tomorrow, October 9th. That is going to be on the 18th floor. That is going to be more workshop format. So no actions at that meeting, but that's an opportunity to talk about the fixed guideway transit projects that are in the draft 2045 plan and where HART is going next, and how we're going to be working together to advance rapid transit projects. And of course, our next board meeting and public hearing, Tuesday, November 5th, 6 p.m., and that one will be on the second floor. Thank you.
Any questions of Ms. Alden? Seeing none, is there any old business? Any new business? We adjourn.
Good
Thank
meeting.
you.